It was a bright sunny day. The sky was clear and blue, without a single cloud. The sun was shining brightly and warmly, filling everything around with its radiance. The silence was broken by a large and strong lizard that attacked someone. However, the man turned out to be stronger, and with one precise blow of his dagger, he killed a huge reptile. It turned out to be Sena Rohil, a young girl with black hair flowing over her shoulders and eyes dark as night, who was pleased with her big catch. She was a D-rank hunter of the Adventurers Guild. Her partner, while collecting materials, admired Sena's fighting skills, who defeated the D-rank monsters in an instant. The girl, in high spirits, picked up the bags of trophies and headed home. Due to her carelessness, the girl slipped and hit her head on the ground. At the moment of impact, memories of her past life returned to her. She remembered that she was a simple office worker and once fell asleep while reading a novel. Then she was woken up by another employee who told the heroine that the lunch break was already over and they were late for a meeting. Hearing this, Sena got up and followed her colleague. On the way, she thought that the story was too boring since the main character ran away, but decided to finish reading it after the conference. The memories ended abruptly as she woke up as Sena Rohil. Opening her eyes in an unfamiliar environment, the girl panicked. She did not understand what kind of memories they were and where the boundaries of reality were. The concerned doctor helped the girl get up, and at the same time, collecting her thoughts in a heap, the heroine realized that she had been reborn in a book that she had read in a previous life. However, to her great regret, she could not remember the whole story, but only remembered the first episodes. Noticing the girl's confusion, the doctors explained to her that she had hit her head very hard, but fortunately, she was not seriously injured. The doctor suggested that injuries were common among hunters. Hearing these words, Sena suddenly remembered that, usually, hunters who moved into such works acquire unusual powers and skills. Realizing this, the girl tried to call up the status screen. From the outside, it looked extremely strange. Stunned, the doctor asked the heroine why he shouted these words. Seeing the patient's abnormal behavior, the doctor decided that this was a consequence of a head blow and gave the command to the nurses to quickly register the girl and immediately prepare her for surgery. Shocked by the situation, Sena swore she was fine. Leaving the hospital, the girl sighed in disappointment, since she had to spend all her earnings on the hospital bill, and now she did not know how she would pay for food this month. At the same time, she still had a hard time believing that she was in a fantasy world. Analyzing her life, she did not understand why she worked so hard in her past life and what her role was in this story. Sena assumed that she was not the main character, but also did not know if she was a secondary character. To begin with, the girl decided to remember whether there was a hunter character in that book. Also, oddly enough, she remembered the name of the book, but was not sure about the plot. The girl also could not remember the name of the main character. Not far from Sena stood a young girl with long golden hair, holding a flower bouquet in her hands. Having heard a guy passing by call this girl the name Ellen, she remembered that the main character of the story had the same name. Suddenly, a young man, without a drop of embarrassment, confessed his love to Ellen right in the middle of the street. Sena was surprised to realize that her neighbor had the same name as the main character of the book. Suddenly, a description of the main character of that story surfaced in her memory, namely the line that she was a young girl, the owner of a flower shop named Helen Equals, whom they declare their love for every day. Sena was stunned to realize that all this time she had been living next door to the protagonist. However, having made sure that she had nevertheless moved to the novel, now the girl could not understand why, in this case, she did not have a status screen. All her hopes were shattered, as it turned out that in this story, she was just an ordinary neighbor. At this time, an embarrassed young guy asked Ellen to date him. The guy's words confused the girl, but she refused with a reddened face. While the confused couple was in their little world, Sena was shrouded in a gloomy aura. She was extremely unhappy with her role in this universe. So a month passed from the moment Sena's memories returned. During this time, she remembered something about the original work. The story revolved around the search for the main male character. Therefore, Ellen had to listen to declarations of love every day, which the girl politely refused, and every time these insignificant characters left in tears. While Sena was watching Ellen, she noticed that every day only one man confessed his feelings for Ellen. Based on this, the girl assumed that at this rate, It would take forever to find the main character. While Sena was thinking that the confession scene had already ended for today, suddenly a gust of wind became stronger. It hit the girl's face, causing her hair to fly in different directions. While the irritated girl was straightening her tousled hair, a guy with silver hair walked past her. The girl was very surprised when the young man called Helen. Hearing a familiar voice, Ellen turned around with a smile. When the girl asked if he had come to buy flowers, Dion answered in the negative, saying that he wanted to say something important. Plucking up courage, the guy confessed his feelings. Ellen was stunned by these words. Without waiting for an answer, Dion ended his confession with a request to marry him. Sena was also shocked by this confession, since Helen had already been confessed that day. At that moment, the boring rule that had been followed throughout the month was broken. It was amazing and strange, and the reason for this was a guy who didn't look like an insignificant character at all. Shocked, Sena stood motionless, her eyes wide and her mouth slightly open. She couldn't believe her eyes and ears. The excited guy proposed marriage to Ellen. He promised to give her happiness. However, the girl's heart was not touched by these words. She immediately refused. Dion asked for the reason for his answer. Then Ellen justified her refusal by the fact that they had known each other for only a month. Only after hearing these words, Dion realized that only a month had passed since their first meeting. However, his feelings were not limited to these times. Sena considered this scene too banal. Sitting on a bench, the heroine watched the couple and was disappointed by the fact that although the rule was broken, the result remained the same. Looking at them, she wondered whether events would continue to develop as usual. If everything happens this way, then, first, Ellen will turn around and go to the flower shop, after which the man will throw himself on his knees. When everything happened exactly as she expected, she became completely bored. However, given that the rules were still broken, she rated Dion's confession 80 points. After the performance ended, Sena decided to return home. However, the devastated guy was still sitting on the cold ground. The girl didn't know how to react to this. Dion was in the same condition as the others. Every man who confessed his feelings to Helen in front of Sena's house, having received a refusal, immediately fell into despair. Therefore, the girl was not surprised by this scene. However, Dion's condition lasted longer than that of the other candidates. The guy continued to call Ellen, crying. Looking at Dion's face, Sena noticed that his face stood out among the others. The guy continued to shed tears continuously. Watching this, Sena realized that he was truly heartbroken. She decided to sit on the bench for a while longer, to give the guy time to calm down. Evening slowly fell over the city as the sun disappeared below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant shades of red, orange, and purple. The sky gradually darkened, and stars appeared on it. It began to rain, and the first drops fell to the ground. Gradually, the rain intensified, and within a few minutes, there was a heavy downpour. Then, Sena decided to remind Dion that he was sitting on her doorstep and ask her to clear the way. The guy, all wet, looked at the stranger with tears in his eyes. Seeing the guy's silver hair and blue eyes up close, the girl drowned in his beauty. However, she suddenly remembered conversations in society about a man with the same physical characteristics, whose name was Dion Fravel. Hearing his name from the lips of an unknown girl, the guy asked if she knew him. Avoiding answering, she asked a counter-question about what such an important person was doing on her doorstep. Standing in front of the guy, she remembered the first time she heard this man's name. Then the other hunters told her that Dion was the eldest son of the head of their guild. Talking about him, the girls were extremely inspired and vying with each other to praise his appearance. It was from them that Sena learned that the eldest son of the Fravel family, who falls in love at first sight, has silver hair and blue eyes. At that time, the heroine did not believe these rumors. However, his friends insisted that the rumors were true and told even more stories about him, saying that the head did not allow him to join the guild because he had a terrible character. After hearing these stories, Sena assumed that Dion was a hot-headed jerk. She also added that she would like to meet him someday. And now, in a stupor, she looked at the man about whom there were so many rumors. Now, the infamous son of her boss sat in front of the door to her house. Sena could not ignore him, since he was the son of the head of the guild where she works. Then she decided to lure him to her side in order to regain her C rank. Seeing the thoughtful look of the stranger, Dion stood up and asked if she wanted to tell him something. To please her boss's son, she apologized for the long pause with a forced smile. And with the same smile, she said that the whole point was that the guy was standing in front of her house. Speaking of this, she pointed her finger towards her doors. Turning around, he saw the doors to the house. He hastily asked for a petition and cleared the way. Sena accepted the apology with a smile and invited the guy into the house to shelter from the rain. Dion was surprised by the stranger's behavior. The guy agreed with a smile and thanked him. When she came home, the girl invited him to sit down and lent him some towels. While the guy was waiting on the sofa, the girl brought hot tea. At this time, Dion wiped his face and hair with a towel. For Sena, this scene was truly beautiful. Such beauty took the girl's breath away. The guy gratefully took the cup. The girl put the tray on the table and thought that most likely her house looked too shabby for the guy. Taking her tea, the girl sat down on the sofa next to the guy. And looking at him, she thought that he did not at all look like a person with a disgusting character. He didn't look like the bad guy from the rumors at all. And yet, she couldn't remember the guy with silver hair and blue eyes in the illustrations for the novel. Based on this, Sena assumed that Dion was a minor character. This means that he is nothing more than one of many who will ultimately fail to win the heart of the main character. While drinking tea, she continued to think that even the son of the head of the guild is powerless before the plot of the book. The man was the first to break the silence. He once again thanked the girl for her help. The guy knew that the girl in the yard saw everything, but Sena pretended that he didn't understand what he was talking about. However, realizing that there was no point in denying, the embarrassed girl awkwardly replied that she didn't want to disturb them and that she shouldn't worry about it. But the guy wanted to talk, so he asked Sena to listen to his story until the rain stopped. The heroine did not consider this something difficult, so she agreed. Hearing the answer, Dion thanked him and began his story. The girl was very surprised to hear that Helen was Dion's childhood friend, as well as his first love. The reason for this was Helen's words that she and Dion had known each other for only a month. Then the guy clarified that Helen has reasons to think so. After all, she erased all her memories, including especially warm and bright moments spent with him, when they came up with new games, participated in various adventures, and played pranks. And the motive for such a categorical decision was Helen's painful past, which haunted her. Ellen Evans is the main character of the world where Sena lives. Due to the fact that she is the illegitimate child of Marquise Aquiles, she was bullied by everyone while she was growing up. Eventually, she decided to run away from home. However, she could not forget her painful past, so she sought out the witch and erased all her memories. Hearing this, Sena remembered that this was written in the backstory of the book he read in his previous life. Once, when Dion was younger, he went to a ball and was completely alone. The guy continued his story, and Ellen was the only person who approached him then. Since then, Dion could not forget her warm smile and gentle hands. At that time, he could not even imagine that such a kind girl suffered so much, and upon learning that she erased her memories and ran away, the guy searched every corner of the capital to find her. And even the fact that she didn't remember him didn't matter. Then, having found her, Dion was confident that he could protect her and wanted to start all over again. But time passed, and more men came to confess to her. And this, not counting the suspicious man who had been following her some time ago. Slightly agitated, Sena looked questioningly at her interlocutor. Then Dion clarified that the man looked like an ordinary visitor, but clearly had a noble origin. Hearing about this, the girl suggested that perhaps Ellen's family had sent that person, and asked what the guy thought about this. Then Dion replied that he also accepted this possibility, since the people of the House of Euclid were also looking for her. But he was concerned by the fact that at the moment, there was no relationship between him and Helen, and therefore, if necessary, the guy would not be able to help her. Hearing these words, Sena realized that this was precisely the reason for the sudden marriage proposal, and thus Dion wanted to become a person close to Helen. In response, the guy simply nodded silently, thereby confirming the heroine's guesses. Having finished his story, Dion noticed that the rain had already stopped and hastily said goodbye to the door. In parting, Sena tried to console the guy, at least a little, so that he would not be so depressed. She spoke words of encouragement with a smile. Finally, Dion smiled for the first time in all this time and, thanking the girl again, left. Only after her boss's son left, the girl was able to relax a little. The day was too tiring for her. Having seen off the guest, Sena decided to take a shower and go to bed. Suddenly, the girl realized that when leaving, Dion called her by name. However, Sena clearly remembered that she did not say her name. Morning came in the city. The streets slowly woke up, filling with the noise of carriages and the voices of people. The heroine woke up from a terrible rumble. Due to lack of sleep, the girl flew into a rage, but still she had to get up. The angry girl went to check what was happening on the street. The door suddenly opened and hit the man who was standing behind it. The girl herself was frightened by the sudden blow and asked if the stranger was okay. The unknown person greeted Sena and asked for forgiveness for standing in front of her door. Seeing the child in front of her, the heroine relaxed a little and asked about the reasons for the noise, and also about knights from a fancy carriage. Sena assumed that they had come to arrest someone. However, the stranger refuted this guess and said that they were here because of the lady who owned the flower shop, since their master wanted to make her his personal gardener. The heroine couldn't understand why a noble man would want to hire an ordinary flower shop owner from a small town. Then she thought that perhaps this was the suspicious man Dion was talking about. Tired of constant thoughts, Sena decided that it was time to put an end to these thoughts, because they were of no use. Having learned about the reasons for the noise, she said goodbye and hurried home. However, before she could close the door, a man pushed her away and burst into her home. Sena decided that the gentleman had simply mixed up the houses and warned that he had the wrong door and that the flower shop was nearby. But the man did not seem to listen to her. Realizing that the stranger was not going to leave, the girl asked why he was breaking into her house, while at the same time, the inspired knight asked his master if he had managed to make a deal with the owner of the flower shop. Without even listening to his subordinate's question, the man sharply answered that Ellie had refused him and headed deeper into the house, looking around. Suddenly, he stopped and, turning around, said in an orderly tone that he wanted to buy Sena's house. While the girl stood in a stupor, he arrogantly ordered her to name the price. The stunned girl did not understand how she should react. Noticing the girl's confusion, a man with hair as black as night and eyes as scarlet as rubies decided to introduce himself in order to show his greatness. Hearing the name Rashid Karlman, Sena realized that the Duke was standing in front of her. The man, with a satisfied look, confirmed his status and again asked the question about how much he needed to pay to buy this house. But the girl did not understand why the Duke needed such an old house if he already had an estate. However, even before receiving an answer, I myself understood the reason. There weren't many options. Most likely this was his plan to get closer to Helen. Such an act was too dubious even for a high-ranking nobleman. Without waiting for an answer from Sena, Rashid himself began to offer his own options based on the average cost of houses of this type. But the heroine did not let him finish and flatly refused to sell. Neither the Duke nor his assistant expected such an answer. The faithful knight could not tolerate such impudent behavior towards his master and began to blame the girl for violating etiquette. But Sena did not consider these words fair. Then the man moved from words to actions and drew his sword. But the D-rank hunter easily dodged the blow. She was not going to tolerate such attitude towards herself, so she warned that at the next attack, she would not stand like a pillar and would fight back. To avoid a battle, the Duke gave orders to the knight to stop. At this moment, another knight who was standing near the door received another blow to the back of his head. Trying to enter the house, Dion accidentally touched the guy by opening the door. Dion apologized to him and greeted Sena with a charming smile. The girl was not expecting guests, so she asked in surprise what he was doing here. And the Duke obviously knew the guy and was not happy with him. Sena was pleased to learn that the two knew each other. Of course, Dion was not happy about this meeting either. Rashid explained his presence by saying that he had come to buy this house. Then, Sena, with a smile on duty, said that this was impossible, since he was the one who was going to buy it. This information once again shocked the girl. Ignoring the hostess of the house, the uninvited guests continued to argue about which of them would ultimately get the house and who could pay more for it. After some time, Sena's patience ran out. She screamed at the top of her voice that the guys would shut up. The angry girl repeated once again that the house was not for sale. Even experienced knights were afraid of the hunter's evil face. The girl suddenly had a headache. Finally, the Duke realized that at this moment, there was no point in trying to negotiate the purchase of the house. In order not to waste his time in vain, he and his people left Sena's household. The heroine was pleased with this, but she also realized that Rashid would return. Dayan thought the same. After the Duke left, the boss's son said that he wanted to ask something, but before he could ask his question, the girl suddenly fell. Luckily, the guy managed to catch her, and she didn't hit the floor. Seina's head hurt terribly from all these nerves. The guy immediately called a doctor. After checking the patient, the doctor concluded that it was a common cold and that after a little rest, she would feel better. The girl was surprised, since she had never been sick before. But the doctor said that there was nothing strange in this. Anyone can get sick one day. Since Seina was in the hospital a few days ago, before leaving, the doctor asked the man to take care of his wife, which stunned the unmarried couple. Before they even had time to clear up the misunderstanding, the doctor had already left the house. Either from the heat or from embarrassment, Seina's face turned red as a tomato. After the doctor's words, the guy also fell out of reality. Seina sat down on the sofa and sincerely thanked her for the help and for calling the doctor. Dayan explained his sudden appearance by saying that he had come to see Ellen, but then he heard a noise and decided to check what was happening here. Then the girl joyfully replied that she was glad that the guy showed up on time. But the guy apologized because he felt guilty that because of him, the girl got wet in the rain, and most likely because of this, she caught a cold. Seina was touched by Dion's concern, and the young man's guilty pug completely amazed the girl on the spot. In response, Seina said that she did not blame Dion for this, but on the contrary, she was grateful to him for helping to get rid of Duke Carlman. Hearing this, Dion hastily explained that he himself did not intend to buy this house, but simply wanted to help Seina. The girl felt relieved, because then she was really surprised. Dion was glad that he could help. Having finished the conversation, the guy asked the heroine to go back to bed, and while she was recovering, he promised to look after the house, which greatly surprised the girl, since she was sure that Dion was going to the neighbor. But the guy replied that it was not that important, and he would go there another time. Dion urgently asked the girl to get a good night's sleep and rest. Having heard that Seina wanted to ask something at the next meeting, the guy happily agreed to answer any question. Sitting back, the girl said that on the first day of their meeting, Dion called her by name. However, she was sure that she herself did not say her name. Then, making an extremely surprised face, the guy replied that the girl herself told him, but the girl was sure of the opposite. Then, Dion, with a confident voice, recalled that on the day of their first meeting, Seina introduced herself. Hearing this, the girl was shocked, since she did not remember this, but the guy was surprised to ask whether she had really forgotten. Dion's words sounded true, so the girl doubted her memory. Moreover, the guy had no reason to lie about such a thing. Suddenly, Seina remembered something else, namely their past conversation about a suspicious man. And I decided to find out if that man was Duke Carlman. Hearing a negative answer, she was extremely dumbfounded, since she was almost sure that it was Rashid. Dion then explained that the man also had dark hair, but it was longer and seemed to be purple in color. After she heard this, she was completely convinced that the pursuer was not the Duke. Then they began to think together about who that stalker was. Suddenly, the girl realized that she was in no condition to worry about her neighbor right now. She should worry about herself first, because Duke Carlman said he would return. Then she firmly said that the next time the Duke talks about buying a house, she will fight back. Dion asked how exactly. Then the girl began to think about possible options, and the first thing that came to her mind was to beat Rashid. And realizing that she would then be arrested, she decided to do it when there were no witnesses. What she heard shocked Diona, and a moment later, his face lit up with a radiant smile, and he answered with a laugh that the idea was not a bad one. A few hours later, having made sure that everything was fine with the girl, the guy asked around and left. It was already evening outside, and the sky was painted in bright sunset colors. Making sure that Seina had closed the door, Dion turned away and left. While he was walking, he thought that technically he had not lied to the girl, saying that she had told her name at the first meeting. At this time, Ellen was working on flowers in her store. Looking at the delicate flowers, she thought about Duke Carlman. At first, seeing the aristocrat surrounded by knights, she was afraid. However, the beauty and gentle tone of the guy he asked to become his gardener won her over. He looked at her as a specialist, not a girl. Ellen was glad that such a high-ranking person appreciated her skills, but she believed that she was not suitable for the role of gardener on his lordship's estate. For this reason, I was forced to refuse the Duke. She told her friend about this during a tea party. After listening carefully to the girl, the mysterious friend suggested that perhaps this man really loved Ellen. At these words, the girl's eyes dropped slightly. Her gaze was directed downwards. Her cheeks became bright pink from the rush of blood, and her lips were slightly pursed. The embarrassed girl did not believe that this was possible, but it gave her butterflies in her stomach. While Ellen was lost in her amorous thoughts, Sana noticed her and came over to say hello. Sana said that she would like to buy some white flowers. Ellen ran up to her neighbor in high spirits. It was impossible not to notice the girl's glowing face, so Sana decided to ask the reason for such happiness. Helen enthusiastically shared her joy with her neighbor, saying that yesterday a man of noble birth came to her and asked her to become his gardener. Raina reeked of misunderstanding, not understanding the reason for such admiration. Then the girl added that this was the first time that someone paid attention to her skills and not to her appearance. Sana immediately understood who she was talking about and was unpleasantly surprised by this fact, since she did not expect such a reaction and did not think that her neighbor might develop feelings for the Duke. However, Ellen, with a slightly upset voice, finished her story, saying that she had to refuse because she was not sure that she could cope with such a responsible job. Suddenly, she remembered that Sana had come to buy flowers, and she ran to the shop to choose white flowers. Looking at the variety of light colors, Ellen thought about which ones to choose. Sana did not have the best opinion of the Duke, so she was worried that he might still return and persuade Ellen, especially since the neighbor was already half conquered by him. At the same time, Sana was on Dion's side and did not want to see him upset again. For this reason, she decided to intervene in this story. Sana put on all her acting skills and said with a depressed look that something had happened that was really bothering her. Hearing about this, as expected, the good-natured Ellen asked what had happened. Continuing her game, Sana pretended that she didn't know whether she should tell her neighbor about this, but she didn't have to persuade for long. She leaned over to Ellen and began to whisper in her ear with an insidious voice, saying that yesterday someone broke into her house. Moving a little further, she clarified that it was Duke Carlman with his people. Then she told in full color, with a little exaggeration, how the terrible Duke demanded that she sell him her house. Hearing how aggressive Rashid acted, and that he even threatened Sana, Ellen turned pale with fear. Then the girl with a benevolent smile took Ellen's hand and said in a worried voice that she could take care of herself, so there was no need to worry. However, she herself is worried about her neighbor because she believes that his lordship needs the houses of this area, and it also seems to her that the Duke likes to torment those who refused him. The naive girl took all Sana's words at face value and was horrified, not understanding how a man could do such a thing. Now all the Duke's actions and words seemed suspicious. Ellen realized with horror that all the Duke's actions were just a ploy to get her house. After her colorful story, Sana watched her neighbor's reaction. Ellen was completely disappointed by the Duke's treachery. Then Sana continued to add fuel to the fire. She said with a sympathetic tone that since she was a hunter herself, she managed to keep the land. But Ellen was more vulnerable. She advised her to be careful and try not to get involved with him. At the end of the conversation, she insistently asked to simply ignore the Duke completely. Ellen, horrified after everything she heard, agreed with her neighbor, and thanking her, said that she would be careful about him in the future. Having heard such welcome words from Ellen, and being pleased with her reaction, Sana replied with a friendly smile that there was no need for thanks, since that was what neighbors were for. Having completely destroyed the image of Duke Carlman, the heroine was proud of herself. The next day, she enthusiastically told Dion about it. Hearing the girl's story, he was surprised, and decided to check with her again whether this meant that she deliberately put the Duke in a bad light in front of Ellen. But Sana sharply replied that this was not so. She explained that it was a normal conversation between neighbors, and Ellen, because of her upbringing, took it that way. She also added that everything she said was based on irrefutable facts. Then Dion asked what she would do if the Duke found out about this, but Sana didn't even listen to him. Noticing that Ellen had left the house, she was inspired, and with a bright smile, sparkling eyes, and slightly pink cheeks, told Dion to at least go greet her. But before she could finish speaking, the neighbor came back in. Then, in order to console the seemingly upset Dion, Sana said that next time everything would work out. But the guy only felt awkward. Sena interpreted such a confused expression on her face as depression, due to a previously received refusal. She smiled with all sincerity and promised to help him. Suddenly, Dion put his hand on the girl's forehead, and it turned out that she still had a fever, but she had not noticed. Dion, with a concerned voice, told her not to do that again, but the heroine did not understand what he was talking about. Then the guy clarified that he meant that Sena should not get in the way of the Duke, just to help him. And with a dazzling smile, Dion added that he decided to let Ellen go. While the girl was returning home, she continued to think about the words of her boss's son and did not understand how this was possible. After all, he said that he had been in love with Ellen all his life. She wondered how he could give up so easily and was worried that he would cry alone again. Sena remembered Dion's crying face when they first met. She was afraid that maybe even now he was crying somewhere. Continuing to plunge into her disturbing fantasies, she imagined how Dion, not noticing anything in front of him because of the flowing tears for his unrequited love, could encounter bandits, who, noticing his noble appearance, will want to rob the guy. But a cute and timid guy will not be able to fight back. Sena was horrified just imagining what could hypothetically happen. She immediately rushed towards the guy to catch up with him and make sure that everything was okay with him. Suddenly, she heard screams and immediately assumed that it could be Dion. Mentally kicking herself for leaving her friend alone in such a dangerous area, she ran towards the voices to help him. However, the one who was lying on the floor was not Dion, and the one who contributed to this was our good-natured Dion. His silver hair shimmered and glowed, as if it had absorbed all the moonlight. The girl decided to hide around the corner and watch what was happening, because she did not understand what was happening. The arrogant gentleman took out his anger on a gang of bandits who were unlucky enough to encounter him. Suddenly, the guy felt the presence of a stranger and in an arrogant tone ordered to stop hiding and come out, which greatly frightened Sena, as she thought that these words were directed at her. Dion's next phrase completely shocked her, since he said that the wall would not be able to hide the body of the observer, while the girl, although she considered herself rather large, was not large enough to deserve such words. While Sena was stunned and did not know what to do, a man came out from around another corner with his hands raised. His name was Turner, and it was to him that Dion had been addressing all this time. When a friend asked why he had been hiding all this time, Turner told him that he looked too frightening and asked in response whether the man on the floor was alive, to which Dion, with an ominous smile, replied that yes, since he was sure that he the guy can take care of that. Hearing these words, the street robbers, gathering all their strength, stood up and ran away in horror. Looking after them, Dion arrogantly said that he did not understand why they ran away, since they would die anyway, and Turner suddenly told him that his superiors had contacted him and asked whether Dion was really busy with the investigation. Then Dion lightly put his arm around his friend's shoulders and, pulling him towards him with a cold smile, asked if Turner was really going to report that he was idle, to which the frightened guy gave an instant negative answer. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by a girl who looked like a teenager, dressed in a black cape that almost completely hid her face, and 2 brown pigtails peeked out from under the hood. She called the guys, and they immediately followed her. From shock and fright, Sena staggered and, unable to stand on her legs that gave way from fear, collapsed to the ground. She was confused to learn that the bandit was the real Dion. At this time, Dion and his friends were walking somewhere. Suddenly, the girl turned to him and asked what happened, since in her opinion, the guy didn't look very good. Having received no answer, she asked again what he was worried about, since they had already tracked down Ellen. Dion finally responded, only saying that that wasn't the problem. Then, the girl with a grin suggested that it was because of Sena Rohill. The expression on his face was more eloquent than any answer. The girls immediately realized that these two had finally met. At this time, Sena was still trying to digest the information she had received. The next day, the heroine went to the guild, where, as always, it was full of people. While waiting her turn, she was still thinking about yesterday's events. After all, then Dion was completely different from the Dion she was used to. In addition, having heard Turner's words, she still did not understand which authorities were being talked about. Since he is the son of the head, the girl assumed that he could very well be a secret agent of the guild or something like that. While the heroine was immersed in her thoughts, she did not notice how her turn came, and only when she heard the administrator's call, she came to her senses and ran up to the counter. The administrator joyfully greeted the hunter. Sena greeted him back and said that she was also glad to meet you. Assuming that the heroine had come for a new job, Anna hastily began to check the lists of orders. But the girl stopped her, saying that she had come to find out something. Having said this, Sena approached the curious administrator and asked in a quiet voice about Dion Fravel. Since he is the son of the head of the guild, Anna naturally knew about him, so Sena asked her to tell her everything she knew. The first thing the administrator thought was that he was a hot but crazy idiot. She went on to say that Dion is the son of the head's first wife, but it seems that the head's brothers and sisters have caused this wife a lot of trouble. The main reason for this attitude was her ignoble origin. As a result, she died quite early, and according to rumors, she died due to the fact that the relatives of the head mocked her. Little Dion probably thought the same, as he began to take revenge on them. There are rumors that Dion stole the bride from the head's younger brother, Salon Fravel. According to the same stories, the engagement of the head's younger sister, Isabella Fravel, was also disrupted by Dion, because he stole her fiancé. And it's because of these rumors that people think he's a crazy idiot. From what she heard, Sena was completely out of her mind. She did not understand whether they were even talking about the same person now. Anna summed up her story by saying that the heroine had better not mess with him. Hearing Sena's last words, she panicked, because she didn't know that Anna would see through her so easily. But the administrator was quite smart, and immediately realized that Sena would not have come all this way out of idle curiosity, so the conclusion suggested itself. She had encountered him somewhere. Anna did not extract details from her, only strongly advised her to stay away from him, since he is truly a dangerous person. Sena thanked her for the advice and said goodbye to Anna, finally asking her to let her know if there were any interesting orders. As usual, there were many hunters in the room, but one of them stood out in particular. Anna immediately noticed the newcomer and showed it to Sena. The girl, looking in the direction where the administrator was pointing, saw the Duke. The heroine did not expect to meet him here, and tried with all her might to hide her face so that he would not notice her. She quickly said goodbye to Anna and ran to the exit to quickly leave. All this time, she continued to cover her face with her hair in order to somehow hide from the Duke. Because of this, she did not notice the person standing in front and accidentally crashed into him. Realizing the extent of her guilt, she immediately apologized. But the arrogant hunter was not in the mood for a polite conversation. Sena still did not want to attract unnecessary attention and tried to answer as politely as possible. But Marcel seemed to be deliberately trying to provoke her. However, it was more important for Sena to get out of here as quickly as possible, so she endured with all her might in order to quickly finish and run away. But this made the guys even more impudent, and each time their words became ruder. Not only did they mock her, but they also brought someone close to her into the conversation. The hunters spoke rudely about Sena and made fun of her father's death. She could no longer endure this, and with a sharp tone, she said that her father was alive. Then Marcel laughed even louder, saying that this was impossible. But Sena did not listen to the next taunt, and with a terrifying smile, asked why the guy starts talking to her every time they meet, since they are not even friends, emphasizing that this is very arrogant of Marcel. And finally, she decided to return all his insults to the guy, telling him to brush his teeth, because his breath stinks, and that's why all the girls refuse him. This made the guy furious. Then, Marcel was the first to show aggression and grabbed the girl by the breasts. He furiously shouted at her, ordering her to shut up. But Sena was calm. She continued to laugh arrogantly in the guy's face, as she was confident in her abilities. Then Marcel lost control of himself and tried to hit her. Sena had no intention of dodging the attack, since everything was going exactly as she had planned. Because if the guy hit her first, then all her further strikes would be considered self-defense. But someone grabbed the guy's hand and stopped the attack. He arrogantly pointed out the injustice and cowardice of Marcel. The most surprising thing was that none other than Duke Carlman came to Sena's defense. The hunter became even more angry. He tried with all his might to free his hand and demanded to be let go. But Rashid indifferently ordered to stop leading himself like this, since he could barely hold it anyway. Having said this, he threw Marcel aside. The hunter fell flat on the floor. With his face distorted with anger, he furiously shouted that he would not let this get away with him. Rashid, with a malicious smile, answered Marcel that he was just a small fry. Sena watched all this in a stupor. Having finished the conversation with the hunter, the Duke immediately switched to gentleman mode and approached the girl and asked if she was all right. The heroine did not understand what was happening at all. With an awkward smile, she replied that she was fine and thanked her for her help, mentally mourning that her perfect self-defense plan had collapsed. At first, the Duke didn't believe it and wanted to ask again, but suddenly he realized that the mistress of that house was standing in front of him. While they were talking, Marcel gained strength and attacked Rashid from behind. Sena noticed this in time and managed to warn Duke Carlman. Thanks to this, he turned around in time and blocked the blow. Having stopped the attack, the Duke continued to comment on Marcel's actions. Every word he said provoked the guy even more. Eventually, the hunter drew his dagger. Noticing that he was about to attack the unarmed man with a knife, Sena could no longer stay away. She knocked the weapon from his hands with one clear kick. After this, the Duke knocked out the guy. From such a force of impact, Marcel flew several meters away. Sena was happy that this idiot grabbed it in time. Having learned about the fight, the knights in charge of security inside the guild ran up. Seeing the hunters lying on the floor, they decided to arrest those responsible for this. Thus, Sena ended up behind bars. The worst thing was that the guards ran up just as they were delivering the blows. If the girl had also been injured, they could have tried to negotiate. And also, due to the fact that the Duke was without security, he was not recognized and was locked up with the heroine. The girl, out of politeness, asked if the Duke was okay and offered to have a snack. However, he refused, saying that his assistant would come for him soon. Unexpectedly, he apologized to Senya for that incident, which greatly surprised her. He explained that he was sorry for breaking into her house without permission, and also promised to punish Gerd. Sena didn't know who it was, but based on the context, she realized that it was the knight who attacked her. Rashid explained that the knight was a lazy knight who never received proper training and remained in his place only because his father was a loyal vassal of the Duke's family. The girl accepted the apology and said everything was fine. She was still in shock from what was happening. Sena believed that most nobles would react differently in such a situation, such as directing their anger at her, or they would continue to furiously shout at the guards to let them out. For example, she recalled the behavior of Marcel, whose family, although noble solely because of the title, but he behaves as if everything is allowed to him. Analyzing this whole situation, she came to the conclusion that the Duke was a strange person. 3 hours later, no one came for Rashid. The girl was extremely surprised by this. Then she suggested that the reasons for such a delay could be that something happened to the assistant. When asked by the Duke what exactly, she could not clearly answer. By doing this, she increased the man's mistrust and wariness. The atmosphere was extremely tense. Sena did not know what she should say in such a situation. Then she suggested that they come up with something, since they were in the same boat. The heroine's last phrase greatly surprised the Duke. Sena couldn't think of anything better than to tell the warden that the man next to her was of noble birth. But, as expected, they did not believe her. Suddenly, someone's footsteps were heard, and the girl was delighted, thinking that it might be the Duke's assistant. But it was not him. The man said that he had come to St. Rohill. However, neither the Duke nor the heroine knew who it was. The stranger introduced himself as the butler of the young Master Marcel, and said that he had come on his behalf to request compensation in the amount of 1 million rupees. The girl was simply shocked by such a sum. The butler began to say that this amount took into account today's damage, as well as other damage that was caused earlier, adding that Sena's father killed the young master's teacher. The girl became furious at these words, and without allowing him to finish, corrected him, saying that it was nothing more than an accident during service. Hearing these words, the Duke also asked what it was about. As it turned out, Alia Asel, Marcel's teacher, was killed while carrying out an order from Sena's father, so the butler and the young master considered him to be the culprit in the teacher's death. However, Sena insisted that Asel agreed to the order as a hunter. But for the vile butler, this did not matter. He only wanted to receive huge compensation. Suddenly, with a malicious grin, he added that he had one more requirement. The condition was that if her comrade agreed to be tied up and beaten by Marcel, then there would be no need to pay, and if he kneeled right now, he could avoid 1 or 2 blows. At that moment, the Duke's assistant burst in. The girl immediately informed him that his lordship was locked in a wretched cell. The assistant immediately ran up to his master and began excitedly asking what happened and how. Seeing this, the butler and the warden realized that he was indeed a duke. Not missing an opportunity, Sena spoke in detail about Marcel's desire to beat the duke. Hearing this, the butler turned pale with fear, and the observer retreated tactically. The man, in a panic, tried to come up with at least some worthwhile excuse, but the assistant was furious. After some time, they sat down at the negotiating table. The duke called Aaron, and he immediately came up. The butler and the guard trembled with fear, awaiting their verdict. When the duke asked what he asked, the assistant replied in one breath that the gentleman ordered not to look for him and not to disturb him when he decided to take a walk alone. But the duke clarified that this was a different request. Then Aaron replied that he was almost done with this matter. However, he suggested first dealing with the vile types who dared to insult the duke. The frightened elderly man, barely able to connect a few words, tried to greet the gentleman correctly, as required by etiquette. But Rashid interrupted him and said that he wanted to meet Marcel in person. The duke, with an arrogant expression on his face, recalled everything that the butler himself had said and added that he wanted to personally check his condition. But the butler could not allow this to happen. Then Aaron asked about compensation. The man immediately replied that they had nothing to worry about. However, the assistant could not end everything so simply. He asked about his young master's desire to beat the duke. Hearing this, the butler immediately began to deny everything and shifted all responsibility to Sena, saying that she alone must pay compensation. These he caused bewilderment and anger in the heroine. She did not agree with the charges and believed that she was not obligated to pay anything. Suddenly, the duke interrupted their argument, saying that he would pay on behalf of Sena. The girl looked at the duke and did not understand what he was trying to achieve. The butler wanted to get money from the heroine. However, seeing the duke's gaze, he did not dare to object and agreed to accept the money from him. But Sena did not agree with this. The duke was the last person she wanted to be indebted to. She already imagined how Rashid would force her to sell the house in exchange for the debt, and she resolutely said that she would never borrow from him. Moreover, she did not agree with such a sum, so in an orderly tone, she asked the butler to introduce her to Marcel so that she could see with her own eyes what condition he was in. She did not accept refusals from the butler, and said that if he did not agree, then she herself would go to Marcel. Sena stood up from her seat and headed towards the exit. The butler immediately rushed after her and stopped her. While they were arguing, the duke suddenly spoke. He turned to Sena with an upset look, reminding her of her own phrase that as cellmates they were in the same boat. The girl was speechless. She did not know what to answer, because these were really her words. The assistant was surprised by this behavior of his master. He asked him worriedly if he was feeling well. The duke ordered Aaron to calm down. In the end, they settled on 600,000 rupees. But the girl was sure that everything was fine with Marcel, and the worst thing for her was that the duke paid. She was worried about her home. Therefore, she turned sharply to the duke and said that she would not sell the house. But Rashid did not understand what it was about. Then, Sena clarified that she was talking about her house and that she would never sell it to the duke. Hearing the duke's answer that she should not sell it, the girl was speechless. The duke repeated her words again and added that there was no need to worry about it. And when asked about the reason for such an act, he replied that he only wanted to make amends for his past offense. He also promised not to contact her again with a request to buy a house. The girl did not expect this. She could not believe that the duke gave the money just like that. Having finished the conversation, Rashid asked and left. Then, Sena realized that the duke was just walking her home. Looking after the departing guy, she could not understand what it all meant. The next day, she woke up again from the noise. The sounds came right from under her windows. She went to the window to check. There was a crowd in front of Ellen's house. Seeing the police there, Sena became concerned for her neighbor. She immediately got ready and ran out of the house. She ran as fast as she could to get to Ellen as quickly as possible. But there were a lot of people near her house. They discussed that something terrible had happened. Then, in a panic, she grabbed one of the women and asked what happened in the flower shop. The woman replied that a thief had broken into the house. Suddenly, a frightened scream was heard, and someone said that there was blood. These words took the heroine's breath away. Someone was being carried on a stretcher, and there was indeed blood. Sena was terrified. She was already imagining the worst. The heroine ran up to the police who were carrying a stretcher, but she was immediately stopped. However, she pushed the policeman away and rushed forward. Approaching the stretcher, she pulled off the white fabric from the bottom. One of the policemen was lying on a stretcher with a wounded head. The girl was shocked, because she was sure that Ellen was there. A little later, while she was drinking tea with Ellen, she laughed at her for a long time. Sena mumbled embarrassedly, justifying her worries. Then, the neighbor said with a smile that she was safe and healthy. However, the heroine still did not understand what kind of commotion there was in the morning. Ellen said that the man on the stretcher was one of the police officers who came to her after she filed a complaint. But upon entering the house, he slipped on the water that the girl spilled and injured himself. And because he was displaced due to the fall that started this commotion, his face was covered. This utterly ridiculous situation seemed ridiculously absurd to the girl. Having finished her tea, Sena asked if they managed to catch the thief in the end. But unfortunately, Ellen replied that the thief managed to escape through the window before the police arrived. She said with a laugh that most likely the robbers ran away because they realized that she had nothing to steal. In any case, the heroine was glad that everything was fine with her neighbor. Ellen also said with a smile that she was lucky, as it would have been more dangerous if criminals had broken into her bedroom while she was sleeping. Suddenly, Sena wondered if this episode with the thieves was in the original story. Then she began to reflect on the development of the event if she then agreed to sell her house to the Duke. Sena suggested that in this case, when intruders broke into Ellen's house with the intention of stealing, it would have been enough for Ellen to scream at the top of her voice, and the Duke would have come running at that very second to save her. Then, he could immediately win Ellen's heart. Sena imagined in all its colors the scene where the Duke saves Ellen with a gentle smile, and the girl looks at him with loving eyes. Having imagined this, the heroine was glad that she did not sell the house. Seeing the neighbor's worried face, Ellen thought that she was still worried about her and hastened to reassure her, saying that she was really fine, especially since she initially knew that this was not the safest area. Sena herself knew that it was a little gloomy there. Suddenly, she realized that it was in the ill-fated areas that most incidents occur. In other words, this is an ideal location for placing the main character, since in such a place all sorts of troubles will always await her. Realizing this, she also realized that Ellen could be in danger if she continued to interfere with the main male characters. She was worried about whether Dion could protect Ellen alone. Suddenly, Helen gently grabbed Sena's hand and said with a sincere smile that she was glad that her neighbor was next to her. Sena was embarrassed by these words. Then Ellen added that other neighbors had previously come to visit her. It was a real happiness for her to be surrounded by such kind people. Hearing this, Sena felt relieved. However, she suddenly felt someone's presence and hurried to say goodbye to her neighbor to go check. Ellen was surprised by the suddenness. In order not to make her worry, Sena lied that she remembered something urgent, and that's why she was in such a hurry. Finally, she reminded the neighbor to always lock the door and left. Ellen said goodbye to her neighbor with a smile. After Sena left, Ellen continued to admire her kindness. Walking out the door, the heroine rushed after the suspicious man who was watching her and Ellen. The unknown person immediately noticed that they were chasing her and ran away. But Sena almost caught up with her and asked who he was. She sped up to grab it. Using her excellent skills, the girl managed to catch up with the stranger in one jump. She landed right in front of him. Sena easily tied up her pursuer. The criminal screamed that it hurt and tried with all his might to free himself from the grip. The girl demanded to answer the question of who he was. The guy shouted that it was him, but the girl did not understand who he was talking about and why he should pursue Ellen. Then the man said her name, Aaron. Sena did not immediately remember him. The assistant was extremely surprised by this, since they had only met yesterday. After these words, she began to remember something. Suddenly, she realized who it was. Realizing that it was the Duke's assistant, she jumped in surprise. Recognizing Aaron, she released him, and they went to the house the Duke had recently acquired, which was located not far from Ellen's house. Aaron was the first to speak. He hastened to explain himself, saying that he was not a stalker or a thief. Not knowing what to answer, she just smiled awkwardly. Then Aaron added that yesterday they were the ones who drove the thief away and alerted the police. Hearing this, the girl understood the reason why the robbers ran away so quickly. The Duke's assistant said that when they saw them, The criminals were very frightened and fled. He was incredibly proud of his master and himself. Then the girl, interrupting Aaron's heated speeches, pointed out that what the assistant presents as supervision and protection of Ellen is in fact nothing more than surveillance and stalking. To the girl's suggestion that the Duke was watching Ellen, the assistant frantically replied that his master was not that kind of person and that Sena had misunderstood everything. Aaron tried his best to justify his master's actions, explaining that Lady Ellen was very important to the Duke, which is why he was trying to be there to protect her. However, the more the assistant jabbered in a panic, the more suspicious he seemed. In any case, Aaron was glad that the lady was safe and sound, but he was still sorry, since they did not have a very good view. That is why they did not immediately realize that a thief had broken into the house. Understanding what Aaron was getting at, Sena immediately made it clear that she was not going to sell her house, once again emphasizing that he will never sell. Having finished the conversation, the heroine said goodbye and left. Arriving home, she continued to wrap her head around the meeting with her assistant. Everything seemed too strange to her. In addition, during the story, the assistant often stuttered, which was also suspicious. After all, it is obvious that this is one of the signs of strong excitement. And besides, he never clarified who the Duke is to Ellen. Looking out the window, she curses all the strange men who are pursuing Ellen. From her house, not only Ellen's house, but also the Duke's house was clearly visible. He still had the light on, which meant he was forcing his men to stay up just to keep an eye on Ellen. Under such circumstances, it is difficult to believe that there are no ulterior motives here. Suddenly, there was a scream, and the lights in the Duke's house turned off. Hearing this, the girl became worried. As the voice was similar to Rashid's, she immediately grabbed her knife and rushed to help. No matter how suspicious the Duke's actions were, Sena could not simply ignore her cellmate who paid her debt. When the girl reached the house, she noticed that it had become quieter again. Although she thought that perhaps she had come running in vain, she still decided to check. Oddly enough, the door was open, and she easily got into the house. There was some kind of sweet aroma floating around. Suddenly, some sounds were heard again. This feeling was familiar to the heroine. She hurriedly began to look for something in her pockets. Taking out the device, she saw that the indicator was glowing red. However, remembering about the Duke, she put the device back in her pocket and hurried to look for him. Finally, she found him. But the Duke did not look like himself. He was squeezed in the corner of the room and shaking with fear. It was obvious that the man was not himself. He was having a panic attack, covering his ears. He tried to shield himself from extraneous sounds. His mind was in a fog. He muttered something, but his speech was incoherent and meaningless. Seeing this, Sena tried to adjust his feelings. But her attempts were unsuccessful. The Duke simply did not perceive the surrounding reality. Then she resorted to extreme measures. After her blow, Rashid finally came to his senses. At first he was confused. Then he became furious. The girl is stunned to hear the guy's aggressive accusations that she didn't warn him that it was a haunted house. "I'll calm down a little." The guy continued to lament that if he had known about ghosts, he would never have stayed here completely alone. To diffuse the situation a little, the heroine tried to laugh it off and suggested looking for the source of the sound. But the Duke was still scared. He didn't want to deal with ghosts. Suddenly, the girl realized something. Seeing the guy's reaction, she realized that the Duke was afraid of ghosts. Blushing with embarrassment and anger, the man tried to refute these words, and the more he denied, the less convincing he looked. Then, Sena again suggested that the Duke work together to find out what the source of the sound was. This idea made the Duke tremble, but in order to prove his courage, he agreed with a chalk-pale face. Having received a positive answer, Sena called the man to follow her. They walked together in the direction of the sound. Crossing an empty corridor, they reached some doors. While the Duke fearfully imagined what would happen behind these doors, the girl boldly opened the door. At this time, the man tried to calm down and collect his thoughts. Behind the door was an empty room, but the guy didn't see this, because the moment the girl opened the door, he turned away in panic. Noticing this, Sena decided to play a little joke. Realizing that there were no ghosts behind the door, the Duke finally opened his eyes. Realizing how terrible he looked from the outside, he began to clean himself up. Avoiding eye contact, the Duke suggests checking the other room, since this one is empty. Sena immediately agreed and went forward. Walking ahead, she could barely contain her laughter. and still did not understand why the Duke did not order her to check everything alone and went with her, because it is obvious that he is afraid. Having reached the next room, the girl assumed that the sound was coming from there. Opening the door, they saw steps leading down. Then the Duke fearfully asked Sen if she was really going to go down to the basement. The heroine decided to stop her mockery and invited him to wait here while she checked everything herself. But the man was against it. He was worried that there might be something worse and more dangerous there than a ghost. Although his attempts to defend him, while he himself was trembling with fear, looked ridiculous, his gallantry deserved respect. Sena tried to calm him down, reminding him that she was a pretty strong hunter, but the Duke still believed that it was not safe to go alone. Toga Girl said that if something happens to her, he can have her house. The man was shocked by these words, because he had never even thought about such a thing. The Duke did not understand the reason for such thoughts. Realizing that the man took these words too seriously, Sena laughingly said that it was just a joke. Despite the guy's anger, the heroine had her own reasons for such a joke. But the Duke was furious, because everything has its time. At the same time, this is exactly what the girl wanted, since in any case, being overcome with rage is better than shaking with fear. Whatever it was, the girl suggested that the guy wait, and she went to check the basement herself. The further she walked, the darker it became. The girl could no longer see anything. She was lucky because she had a mana stone. Having illuminated her path with a mana stone, she reached the door. But by that time, the noise had already stopped. Noticing this, the Duke hastened to offer to return, since the sounds had stopped, which meant that now everything was in order. But Sena was adamant. She bravely walked forward, and the Duke followed behind, still trying to dissuade the girl from this idea. Sena was already annoyed by his constant persuasion. She abruptly pulled out her hand and angrily ordered to let herself go. The guy was confused and scared at the same time. Seeing such an expression on his lordship's face, Sena could not contain her laughter and began to laugh loudly. Looking at the Duke's red face, it was hard to believe that he was called a ferocious monster. Sena suddenly spoke with a serious tone. Looking straight into the man's eyes, she said that the thing below was not a ghost, and her phrase that it was a demon surprised the guy even more. Then, in order to prove her words, she showed him a device with a red stone in the center and explained that it reacts to demons. Putting the device back in her pocket, she continued, saying that the sweetish aroma that fills the whole house is also proof. After listening to the girl, the Duke asked her how the demon managed to cross the capital's barrier. Sena herself did not know the answer to this question, but she had certain thoughts about what kind of demon they were dealing with. But before they could reach the source of the sound, some force pushed the girl down the stairs. Rashid tried to catch her. He pulled the girl towards him to stop her fall. As a result, she dropped the mana stone. Also losing their balance, they both fell backwards. While the guy was worriedly asking if Sena was okay, she didn't even understand what had happened and why the Duke pulled her back so sharply. The girl looked at the guy with dumbfounded eyes, not understanding what was going on. Having come to her senses, she abruptly jumped up and asked what the Duke was doing. Then the man explained that even though there was a simple gust of wind from an unknown force, there was no point in it, because they were in a closed space with no windows. The girl did not pay attention to the Duke's concerns and moved on, deciding to start looking for her mana stone. The stone rolled into the basement and lay next to the golden-haired girl. As Sena got closer, she noticed that the girl looked like a creepy version of Ellen. At first glance, she realized that it could not be her neighbor. Following the heroine, the Duke also entered the basement, and when he saw the evil copy of the beautiful Ellen, he was terribly frightened. Sena immediately noticed a hint of fear on Rashid's face, and she couldn't miss such a great opportunity to mock the Duke. The heroine immediately turned on her acting talent, and pretending that her back hurt, asked the man to help lift the stone. From such a request, the guy turned even more pale. He wanted to refuse with every fiber of his soul, but because of the feeling of guilt, he could not say no. With shaking legs, he walked towards the mana stone. The girl was no longer able to hold back her laughter. She laughed on the sly. The Duke was so happy when he reached the stone that he did not even notice that something was floating in the air right above his head. Seeing this, the girl suddenly stopped laughing. Noticing this, the Duke became even more frightened and asked the heroine what had happened. Suddenly, this something approached the Duke and began asking the same question non-stop about why the man killed him. The unknown thing looked like a ghost in a black robe. Bloody red footprints appeared around, and suddenly, a ghost with an eerie smile suddenly descended, as if trying to get to the Duke. Realizing that Karlamsen was in a stupor, the girl called him to bring him out of his trance. Realizing that it was a demon, she immediately rushed to the Duke. But the men had already begun to have a panic attack. He trembled with chilling horror, not noticing anything around. With a trembling voice, he repeated that it was Serena. The demon with red eyes and a terribly scary face continued to rapidly approach. Looking at the ghost again, Sena noticed that she had the same eye color as the Duke. The demon inspired fear and panic, but the situation was also heated by the fact that the ceiling was on the verge of collapse. Sena tried to get the Duke out of there. As soon as they crossed the threshold, they both fell to the floor. At that same second, the ceiling collapsed. The Duke had already come to his senses a little, but he was still in a state of shock. Just outside the door, the demon, still in the guise of a creepy woman, hung on the gallows. Her sinister laughter echoed in the basement. From these sounds, the Duke fell into a stupor again. He repeated nonstop that he did not kill her. Coming closer, the girl put her hands on Rashid's shoulders and said in a calm voice that everything he sees now is unreal, a mere illusion, so he doesn't need to be afraid. Having made eye contact, she added with a smile that he just needed to close his eyes and wait a little. She would be back soon. The Duke was still not fully aware of reality. He remembered Serena, who was wearing a soft pink dress, and her long hair was flowing beautifully in the wind. Suddenly, the boundaries of reality and fiction were blurred. Thinking that the girl was still alive and continuing to call her, the Duke walked towards her. He walked with uncertain steps, but at the same time, he was glad that the girl was alive. He did not want to believe in her death. All this time, Serena never turned around. Suddenly, the amplitude of the movement of her hair became sharper, as if her hair was getting longer every second. Suddenly, she turned around, and the fairy tale world instantly collapsed. The girl with a creepy face and an ominous voice continued to blame the Duke for her death. The man continued to make excuses, repeating that it was not him. Unexpectedly, Sena returned with good news. She reported that she had caught a small demon, and once again explained that everything that the Duke had seen all this time was just an illusion. Stretching out her hand, she showed her prey, clarifying that it was an avalacus, a rather rare species of demon. She explained in detail exactly how these little pests operate, and how they get nightmares from their victims, and how they project them into the real world as an illusion. Remembering that these demons love to eat fingers most of all, the girl hurriedly began to check the Duke's hands. Sena also added that the incident with the wind was also just a trick of these small creatures. The stunned Duke asked only one question: how Sena managed to defeat the demon. The girl explained everything by saying that she is a hunter and specializes in demons that control the mind. The Duke still could not recover from the nightmare he had seen. Noticing his pale complexion and unnatural behavior, the concerned heroine asked Rashida if he was okay. Replying that everything was fine, the Duke tried to get up. Suddenly, his face was right in front of Sena's nose. Only now did he notice the girl's kind smile. Only now realizing that the heroine was not so aggressive, but on the contrary, very kind and sweet, the Duke became embarrassed. Watching the Duke's reaction, Sena was perplexed, not understanding what he was thinking. However, since they had already caught the demon, the girl, standing up from the floor, offered to go back. With a charming smile, she told the guy to take her hand and stand up. The Duke was fascinated by her. He agreed and took Sena's hand. As morning came, the townspeople began to heatedly discuss something. Some of the neighbors heard loud noises. Some even thought it was an earthquake. But Sena hastened to calm them down, explaining that only the floor had caved in, and the reason for this was that the house was already old. This explanation suited the neighbors quite well. Hearing the rumors, a worried Ellen ran to the heroine to make sure she was okay. She was disheartened by the news that the floor had caved in. Sena told her the same thing as the rest of the neighbors. But suddenly, Ellen's expression changed, and she asked in a serious tone what Sena was doing in his lordship's house. Trying to come up with something on the fly, the heroine replied that she was helping with the move. Hearing this, Ellen, with the same smile, said that she was glad to know that Sena was not hurt. Having finished the conversation with the heroine, she furtively glanced towards the Duke. Suddenly, their eyes met. Noticing this, Ellen bowed and said goodbye to her neighbor and left. Finally, there was silence, and Sena breathed a sigh of relief. But before they had time to enjoy the peace, Aaron appeared out of nowhere, running with all his might towards his master. Concerned, he asked what happened and how. In order not to tell the whole story from the very beginning, the Duke only showed to study it, but the assistant did not understand what he was talking about. Then Rashid called Sena. The girl immediately understood what it was about and began to look for something in her pocket. She pulled out a small demon in the shape of a bee and handed it to Aaron. The Duke signaled to his assistant to take the demon away. Looking at the small thing in his hands, Aaron still had quite a few questions, but the Duke ordered him to return to the estate and study it, and also call a doctor. At first, Sena didn't understand why the doctor was needed, and when I understood, I was shocked. The Duke personally cleaned her wound. This made the girl feel awkward and grabbed the towels, saying that she could handle it herself. The Duke continued to stare at her, but for Sena, such burns were common when working with mana stones. After all, she is one of those who are not subject to magic. When a person uses magic with a stone, as soon as the mana runs out, the stone turns black. But Sena came up with his own way of using the mana stone. It causes the mana inside the stone to quickly leak out, and then uses it as an explosive. Dust usually rises after an explosion. However, the target can also be hit with one hit. This is a fairly effective way of hunting. Rubbing her hand, Sena continued to think about the recently captured demon, and the Duke watched her silently. Suddenly, he asked if this often happens to her, and the girl calmly replied that yes, since she is a hunter. But most of all, Rashida was surprised by the phrase that Sena no longer owed him anything, because he did not understand what kind of debt he was talking about. Then the girl explained that she was talking about the day when the Duke helped her get out of prison. Then the Duke agreed with a smile, thanking him for his salvation. He also added that from now on the girl can count on his help. However, he was extremely surprised when he heard a request to share with her the information that Aaron would find. And although he promised to fulfill any request, this time he refused. He could not give the reason for the refusal, but in return, he promised to fulfill any other request. The girl insisted on her own, arguing the need to obtain such information, but the Duke was adamant. However, Sena did not want to retreat, because a demon appeared in the capital, and it was natural to worry about this. But even this reason was not enough for Duke Carlman. Having received another refusal, the girl became seriously angry. Their conversation was interrupted by Aaron, who brought the doctor. However, as soon as he entered, he immediately noticed the overwhelming and tense atmosphere between the two. This made the assistant and doctor feel uncomfortable and awkward. They froze in place and did not know how to act in such circumstances. And when they heard the girl's angry cry that everything was fine, they jerked in fear. The Duke continued to maintain an imperturbable expression on his face, showing with all his appearance that further disputes had no meaning. Having finished the conversation, Sena still allowed the doctor to give herself first aid. On the way home, she continued to think and analyze what had happened over the past couple of days. In particular, she was haunted by thoughts of a demon who managed to cross the capital's barrier. Suddenly, she felt someone's presence right behind her. The heroine turned around sharply to check who it was, because the unknown person managed to get so close unnoticed. But before she even had time to react, the stranger grabbed her wounded arm, causing her pain. Suddenly, the unknown person asked with concern in his voice if the girl was okay. As it turned out, it was Dion. However, for some reason, when she saw him, the girl did not calm down, but rather felt some awkwardness. Scenes from that night flashed through my mind. At some point, she even turned pale from worry. Dion, not knowing the reason for such a reaction, became even more alarmed, thinking that she was wounded. The girl continued to think that now the man looks completely different. It was as if they were two different people. Having collected her thoughts, Sena answered with an awkward smile that it was just a small problem. But the answer did not satisfy the guy. He was still worried and questioned about the details. Then the heroine remembered that Dion was the son of the head of the guild and suggested that he might have heard something about demons. Taking advantage of the situation, she invited him to a conversation. They went to a restaurant to continue their conversation there. Sena showed with all her appearance how much she liked the food. Dion was pleased with this reaction. During lunch, they discussed the appearance of a demon in the capital. Unlike the Duke, Dion immediately agreed to share information if he found out anything. Looking at the guy's elegant behavior, Sana still couldn't understand what happened that night, and whether that arrogant man was Dion. Suddenly, Dion started talking about the Duke. He asked Sana not to help Rashid anymore, or even better to stay away from him. But the heroine could not promise such a thing, because the Duke is her neighbor, and even before that, he helped her. She also said that the Duke was not so bad. And besides, his people helped Ellen when thieves broke into her house. However, this was the first time Dion had heard about the incident with the thief. Then Sana told him everything and added that there was nothing to worry about now, because Ellen was fine. But suddenly Dion asked if she was okay. The heroine was surprised by such a question, because the thief broke into the neighbor's house, and not hers, and answered that, of course, she was fine too. When the girl asked if he was going to visit Ellen, Dion replied that he was not sure yet. However, he looked worried. Sana interpreted this expression as concern for Ellen, and was once again convinced of the authenticity of his feelings for Ellen. Continuing to live irritably, she thought that if all this was really a pretense, then he was a brilliant actor. Suddenly, the man's expression changed. He invited the girl to eat her portion, which he cut in advance, since she had injured her hand. The girl gladly gobbled up the food on both cheeks and was touched by Dion's kindness. In the end, all that mattered to her was how the guy treated her, and it was okay even if he had another side. Dion watched Sana with joy. When the guy asked what he would do after lunch, the girl said that she would most likely go to the library to look for information about the demons that had appeared in the capital. Then the guy offered his help, but the girl hastened to refuse because she was embarrassed to rely on him so much. However, Dion, with a dazzling smile, reminded her that her arm was injured and she would most likely need his help. Sana to some extent agreed with him, so after some thought she agreed. After finishing lunch, they came to the library. Sana walked ahead, and Dion followed, although this was not part of her plans. Originally, she was going to question the guards. However, with Dion, she would be very noticeable. In addition, he could help Sana meet with the mages from the Adventurers Guild in the future. With an evil grin, she made plans for the future. The administrator greeted them at the library and asked them to show their IDs. Sana showed her D-rank hunter card. Dion also showed his document. The librarian was delighted with his beauty, but she quickly came to her senses and said that everything was in order with the documents, and they could move on. However, the girl turned to Dion by the name Russell Dar. Hearing this, Sana began to look suspiciously at the guy. The administrator showed with a smile where the books on the desired topic were located. The heroine and Dion went in the indicated direction. Walking past the shelves, the guy was simply silent. At the same time, the girl was waiting for an explanation. With every silent step, her doubts only intensified. The girl's suspicions reached their peak. She came to the conclusion that Dion might be a fake. Feeling the guy's gaze on her, she turned in his direction. Under his gaze, she felt awkward and asked what was the matter. The heroine was shocked, thinking that Dion was going to reveal his true identity. The guy, after collecting his thoughts for a long time, said that he wanted to tell her the truth. The girl stood holding her breath, waiting for what the man would say. But the suddenly flushed Dion revealed that he hated libraries with all his heart. Obviously, this was not the truth that Sana expected. Then Dion embarrassedly explained that he could simply fall asleep while reading and asked the girl not to leave without him. The heroine was at a loss at such a request, but agreed. To dispel the awkward atmosphere a little and keep the conversation going, Sana suggested that Dion didn't particularly like books, to which the guy immediately responded that he simply hated them. Reina was extremely annoyed that Dion was taking this so seriously. Then the girl directly asked who Russell Durr was. The question was unexpected for the guy, but the girl, realizing that she had said too much, instantly covered her mouth with her hand, as if trying to return the words already spoken. Realizing that he was talking about the hunter's ID, which he showed, he calmly began to answer the question. He replied that the identification was made on the orders of his father, and he himself did not know who this name belonged to. The girl was distrustful of the answer and asked a counter-question about whether it would be easier to use her real name. Then Dion replied that the girl was of course right, but he was not registered as a hunter. The reason for this is that many people are wary of him since he is the eldest son of the head. For the same reason, they don't want him to become a hunter. Sana didn't even imagine this, but based on the fact that the father created a fake ID for his son, she decided that the head really cares about him. but the guy wasn't sure about this. Then the heroine noticed that as soon as she mentioned the chapter, his mood immediately deteriorated. Therefore, she decided not to talk about the chapter anymore and start searching for the right book. But her hand hurt more than she thought. Noticing this, Dion helped her get the chosen book. At that moment, he looked like a handsome prince from fairy tales. Sana took the book and thanked him for his help. It was Elliot Ruffman's work about telepathic demons. The heroine said that the scientist-writer had been tracking and studying demons all his life, and was also the first to compile a bestiary of demons. She enthusiastically continued her story, saying that the demon she encountered in the basement last night was a telepath. After listening to the girl, Dion began to read the page on which the book was open. There, the author wrote about his experience of a collision with a demoness, about how he froze in place, rooted to the spot, when she used her spell. Dion continued to read the story aloud, and according to the narrative, after that, she touched the scientist's lips with her tongue and began to slowly run her red nails along his thigh. But upon hearing this, Sana abruptly closed the book, not allowing him to finish the paragraph. The girl turned pale in shock, and only after looking at the book again did she notice the subtitle that the book was dedicated to the study of the seductive charms of succubi. She was embarrassed to even look in the man's direction. At the same time, Dion looked at her with a gentle and kind smile. While Sana's thoughts disappeared from embarrassment, and she stood in a stupor, the guy called her. In order to help the heroine relax, he praised the author, saying that most likely the scientist was dedicated to his work. Although Sana was still extremely embarrassed, she still agreed with Dion's assumption, but she was still ashamed, so she covered her face with a book and asked the guy to sit and wait somewhere while she looked for information. Having said everything she was going to say and not waiting for an answer, she quickly ran away. Dion didn't even have time to react. Moving away from the guy, Sana began to mentally curse Elliot Ruffman for the shame he had experienced. After all, she admired him so much, listening to stories about how the scientist risked his life in the name of science, and in the end, he dedicated his work to succubi, describing in detail his meetings with them. Having come to her senses a little, the girl noticed that she had been holding the book tightly all this time. After realizing this, she realized that her actions earlier may have created the wrong impression. This was a blow to her. The last thing she wanted was such misunderstandings. However, there was no point in worrying now, because the guy had already formed the wrong impression about her. Therefore, Sana decided to just start reading. After reading a couple of pages, the girl noticed that, although the book was vulgar, there was also useful information. In addition, the author organized all the information well. After flipping through several pages, Sana found the one she needed. There was information about the demon she had captured. There wasn't much information. According to data from the book, this demon is not typical for the area where the heroine lives and is not strong enough to break through the barrier of the capital. Based on this, the girl came to the conclusion that someone deliberately caught and released him there. Time flew by quickly while reading. Having finished with the books, Sana decided that it was time to return. And only standing up, she noticed that it was already sunset. She began to look around in search of Dion. Not finding him nearby, the girl ran to the side where they separated. Running between the shelves, she noticed a man in a cape. The stranger's purple hair caught her attention. She remembered Dion's story about the suspicious man who was following Ellen. Then, Sana assumed that this was the unknown person. While the heroine was watching him, the suspect hurriedly left somewhere. Having followed him, she saw that the stranger was entering the area with prohibited books. Then her fears intensified even more. After all, there was a high probability that an unknown person was watching Ellen with the aim of harming her. Therefore, in order to protect her neighbor, Sana began to keep an eye on the suspicious guy. But he just walked between the shelves. Since the use of magic in the library is prohibited, Sana was sure that if she had to fight with him, then victory would definitely be hers. The stranger abruptly changed his direction. The girl followed, but suddenly the man began to return. Noticing this, Sana stopped. To avoid getting caught, she also decided to turn back. But the steps were getting closer, and in panic, looking around, the girl began to look for a secluded place. Since there was no more time, she decided to hide behind the shelves. But before she could run away, someone suddenly grabbed her hand. An unknown force pulled Sana towards him. The frightened heroine resisted and tried to free herself. But when she heard Diona's voice, she instantly calmed down. Looking back, she saw that Dion was standing behind him. The man asked to be quiet and said that he would explain everything later. Suddenly, an unfamiliar voice was heard. The purple-haired man addressed the middle-aged man, calling him "my lord." The Marquis informed the guy with purple hair that Duke Carlman began to suspect something, and they needed to find Ellen first. Looking at Marquis Equils, Sena little by little began to remember the beginning of the novella that she had read in a past life. According to the plot, during her stay in the family of the Marquis, Ellen suffered a lot, and therefore she called all of them bad people, with the exception of the Marquis Equilus himself, since it was difficult to determine whether he was good or bad. The members of the Equilus house treated her inhumanely, because she is an illegitimate child, but despite the fact that everyone hated her, there was one person who introduced her to room, clothes, food, and maids. This was the Marquis of Equilus. However, he never visited Ellen. Unlike other family members, the Marquis seemed unwilling to acknowledge Ellen's existence. Other children beat her. They openly mocked her. But the adults did not react at all. All this happened with the tacit consent of the head of the family. No matter how much his children and wife bullied Ellen, the Marquis never tried to stop them. But at the same time, he never tried to worsen her situation. Everything was as if Ellen did not exist for him at all. However, in this case, it was unclear to Sena why he decided to find Ellen now. At the same time, she became convinced that the man with purple hair was the one who was watching her neighbor. Suddenly, the Marquis asked an unexpected question. He asked about the girl from the flower shop who looked a lot like Ellen. And the purple-haired guy's answer was even more shocking. He said that that girl was definitely not Ellen. Sena was confused, but Dion reminded her to be quiet since they were still hiding. Then the guy substantiated his conclusions to the Marquis. He said that when they came for the first time, the girl was indeed very kind and sweet, just like Ellen. But the second time, the girl attacked the subordinate guy with purple hair and drove him away. But that wasn't the only reason he claimed the girl wasn't Ellen. After listening to him, the Marquis asked about the main reason for this statement. Then the guy said that when they came for the third time, the girl drove them away in a rage. She furiously attacked them with a broom, swearing at them and calling them the most terrible words. Unable to listen to these vulgar words any longer, the noble gentleman ordered the story to end as he had already heard enough. Sena and Dion were also taken aback by Ellen's behavior. The heroine remembered her recent conversation with her neighbor. Then she taught Ellen to survive in this world. She told her that to live in this dangerous world, a girl needs to know a few bad words. Sena said curse words and taught Ellen to repeat them when necessary. After listening to the story of the guy with purple hair, the heroine realized that most of what Ellen said were words that she had taught. However, among everything Ellen said, there were curse words that Sena did not teach. Seeing Sena's expression, Dion couldn't help but laugh. Then the heroine abruptly covered his mouth with her hand, warning him in a quiet voice not to make any noise, otherwise they would be caught. After the guy's words, the Marquise was also convinced that the girl was not Ellen, because she would not express herself like that. Although the guy with purple hair agreed with this, he still said that he wanted to check everything again. But since Ellen had already seen him, he said that he would disguise himself. At this point, the guy finished his report. After those two left, Dion laughed a lot and asked how Sena even came up with the idea of teaching Ellen swear words. The heroine was surprised, not understanding how the guy knew about this, but he explained that Sena had it all written all over her face. Then the girl explained that she taught it only for the purpose of self-defense, so that Ellen could use it against the Duke and his people. And although the girl used this knowledge under other circumstances, it still had an effect. These words made Dion even more cheerful. He also noted that it was undoubtedly effective. Then the embarrassed Sena said that since Dion liked everything so much, he should pay her. The guy liked this idea, and he rushed to look for the wallet. Seeing this, the heroine rushed to stop him, clarifying that she was just joking. Then Dion pretended that he did not understand this. However, a moment later, he laughed again, saying that he was also joking. Looking at the guy's carefree laughter, Sena remembered something. She asked if Dion was worried. Seeing the confused expression on her friend's face, the girl clarified that the point was that the Marquise was looking for Ellen, and perhaps he would try to get her back. But the guy wasn't particularly worried about it. Sena found Dion's attitude too careless. Then, Thinking that since Ellen lived next door, it would be unsafe for her if dangerous people were hanging around her neighbor, Sana decided that if push came to shove, she would kill them all. After all, their actions could affect her home too. Dion, as before, watched the heroine with tenderness in his eyes. Noticing the guy's gaze, Sana asked why he was looking, but the man only replied that he was simply at ease and having fun with her, which greatly surprised Sana. And to the heroine's question about what he was going to do after everything, Dion replied that he had not decided yet. The girl nodded automatically in response, but suddenly realizing, she asked in shock how he could not think about it, and what about his feelings for Ellen. The girl was simply dumbfounded by Dion's indifference. Having finished the conversation, the guy got up from the floor. He justified his behavior by the fact that Ellen was safe next to Sana, and offered, since they had already finished all the business in the library, to take her home. The heroine looked at him and did not understand what was wrong with him. The guy, holding out his hand, waited for her answer. The next day, Sana decided to consult with the administrator at the guild. After listening to her friend, Anna suggested that either the guy no longer loved that girl, or he simply decided to forget everything and move on. The heroine still did not understand why the guy made such a decision. However, in order not to arouse suspicion, I decided to end the conversation there. Observing the expression on Sana's face, Anna asked with a grin who she was talking about. The excited heroine replied that it was about his friend, but the astute administrator didn't believe it. Then the heroine decided to change the topic. She asked Anna if there was anyone from the investigative department in the department now. Hearing the question, the administrator began checking the documents. Having found the necessary document, she said that at the moment, everyone had gone home. This looked very strange, so Sana immediately assumed that perhaps the Duke was deliberately preventing others from contacting this department. Anna also thought it was strange and said that perhaps there was some mistake in the documents. She invited her friend to go up and wait there, saying that the department was on the 3rd floor. Standing at the door, the heroine doubted whether to enter and suggested that perhaps the door was completely locked. However, the door opened easily. Looking at the open door, Sana was surprised that everything turned out so easily. A man sitting outside the door and checking some documents, seeing the girl, said that she had arrived earlier than he thought. Hearing this voice, Sana was discouraged. Dion sat in front of her. Raising his azure eyes, he looked at the heroine with a smile and showed that he had been waiting for her. Sana was extremely surprised to hear these words. Then Dion recalled that yesterday, on the way home, the girl told him that she would stop by the investigative department. After these words, Sana also remembered that conversation. However, the girl still did not understand how Dion was able to enter here at all, because usually, if no one is there, the doors are locked. Rising from his seat, the guy replied that he opened the door himself, and he took it out of his pocket and showed him the key to the lock. Seeing someone else's name on the keys, the girl turned pale. But Dion, with his usual smile, said that he had stolen the keys from the magician of the investigative department. Having said this, he handed the keys to her. The girl was simply shocked by how calmly he told all this. At that moment, Sana thought that today, Dion would act like a crazy bastard. They began to rummage through documents and reports, searching for the necessary information. Along the way, the heroine asked the guy if there was anyone in the office when he arrived. Dion replied that there was no one. Then, Sana began to worry about what would happen to the owner of the key if they found out about the break-in. After thinking a little, the guy replied that most likely he would get a scolding from his boss. Hearing this, the heroine felt guilty towards the stranger, who would most likely be punished because of them. Therefore, Dion suggested finishing quickly and leaving. But no matter how much they searched, they could not find a report about a demon that had entered the Duke's house. After searching everything around, they came to the conclusion that the report had been hidden. Since the information is so secret, most likely even a direct question would not have any effect, so they decided to finish with the reports and come up with another way. Then Dion suggests getting out and leaving. In response, Sana asked if she could ask a question. Having received his consent, the heroine asked if he really gave up his feelings for Ellen. Hearing a positive answer, the girl opened her mouth in surprise. Dion added with a smile that he believed that Ellen would be better off with the Duke. Sana tried to console the guy, saying that he was a wonderful person. And although she didn't say exactly what she thought, she still said a lot of flattering words and said that he would definitely meet a wonderful person. Hearing the girl's kind words, gently touching Seina's hand, he asked her to make him feel better. At that moment, the guy's eyes were beautiful. His gaze was full of tenderness. Trying to answer at least something, the heroine said that she was not sure that she could make him laugh as much as yesterday. He did not expect such an answer. Dion couldn't help but laugh. It brought him to tears. Seeing the guy's reaction, Seina became even more embarrassed and, blushing, asked what she should do to help. Dion, still laughing, replied that it would be enough if she just stayed nearby. Based on the man's words, Seina decided that he meant that the girl should spend more time with him, and I came to the conclusion that Dion just needed a friend. Taking this opportunity, the man invited the girl to have a snack. But the girl was busy looking for work, so she was forced to refuse. Seeing the depressed expression on Dion's face, the heroine tried to change the subject. But because of Dion's puppyish appearance, Seina felt guilty. After some time, they put the room in order. Everything was perfectly tidy. Everything looked as if no one had been there. Having finished cleaning, Dion and Seina headed towards the exit. Suddenly, some steps were heard, and abruptly grabbing the guy, the heroine said that they needed to hide and wait until this man left. Having said this, Seina warily pressed Dion against the wall. The guy was embarrassed by such closeness, but the girl was focused on the steps. After some time, the footsteps died down, and she reported this to Dion. Realizing that they were safe, she exhaled with relief and looked angrily at Dion. Seina was angry that the guy was just trying to get out without thinking about the fact that they might get caught. Dion tried to justify himself, saying that in this case they could have lied, saying that they came here on business. But the answer did not satisfy the girl. She was furious, because it is obvious that no one would believe such nonsense. However, remembering that her boss's son was standing in front of her, Seina mentally calmed herself down. Coming closer, she asked as calmly as possible if Dion knew that he had a rather attractive appearance. She explained her words by describing the guy's appearance. His shiny silver hair, clear blue eyes, and damn attractive facial features stood out from the rest. And even that librarian was delighted with Russell Durr. Hearing such a high assessment of his appearance, the guy involuntarily laughed. This made Seina furious again, because she was talking about a serious topic. But the guy was glad to hear that the heroine thought he was handsome. In any case, he promised to be more careful in future. In return, he asked the girl to keep her promise and be there. Remembering their recent conversation, she agreed. Seina promised that she would try to keep her promise. The next morning, waking up from the knocking of doors, the sleepy heroine opened the door. A cheerful and happy Dion stood on the threshold. He happily invited the girl to dinner. The girl didn't think the guy would come so early, but given that it was already midday, Dion had no intention of leaving. He abruptly grabbed Seina's hand and pulled her along with him with a smile. The next day, Dion came again, but this time an hour later, he promised with puppy eyes that this time he would not forcefully drag her along with him. And a day later, the guy returned again. This time, he invited Seina to the pastry shop. For a couple of days, he came every day and invited the heroine somewhere with a smile. This time, realizing that objections were pointless, she invited Dion to come in, since she needed to clean the house. The man immediately accepted the invitation and, thanking him, went into the house. Wiping off the dust, the heroine continued to think about the current situation and did not understand whether Dion was really going to come every single day. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden knock on the door. Since Seina said that she was not expecting anyone today, Dion offered to open the door himself. Duke Carlman stood on the threshold. Seeing him, Dion sharply slammed the door. But still, he had to open the door and invite the Duke into the house. Seina felt uncomfortable due to the oppressive atmosphere between the Duke and Dion. However, she tried to remain calm because this is her home. Hearing the Duke say that he had come to propose to Seina, Dion abruptly interrupted him by answering no. Rashid was indignant at Dion's tactlessness because he was not addressing him, but the guy continued to bicker, and for some time, forgetting that they were in someone else's house, they argued. Finally, Seina's patience ran out, and she reminded the uninvited guests that this was her home. Hearing the heroine say that she would throw them out of her house if things continued like this, they immediately remained silent. Seina was pleased with herself because she managed to show who's boss. Having achieved calm, she turned to the Duke with a question about what his proposal was. The Duke said that the basement of her new house was not in the best condition, and not only the basement. The girl replied that this was expected, because the house was quite old. Therefore, the Duke announced that he was going to reconstruct the entire house. Hearing this, Sena began to worry about Ellen, because during these 2 months, while the Duke was not around, she would have no one to protect her. Returning to his request, Rashid said that he would like to rent Sena's house during the reconstruction. Dion immediately expressed his disagreement. Although it was not about buying, but about renting, Dion was still against it. Ignoring Dion's indignation, the Duke offered a contract with a monthly payment. He immediately took out the documents and showed the conditions written there. Despite Dion's protests, Sena still decided to familiarize herself with the contract. When she saw the monthly payment amount, she was dumbfounded. The Duke proudly announced that everything was written correctly and that he was going to pay exactly 500,000 rupees every month. Hearing about this, the girl immediately agreed, calling the Duke a precious guest. Rashid was glad that the girl accepted his proposal. Having made her final decision, Sena proceeded to sign the contract, especially since the Duke would be able to continue protecting Ellen while living there. But Dion continued to protest. He insistently asked the heroine not to do this, saying that he could also pay her 500,000, although the girl did not understand why he needed this. Seeing such a violent reaction from the guy, the Duke became interested in what connected Sena with Dion. The heroine answered without hesitation that they were just friends. These words greatly shocked Dion. He turned pale in surprise. The guy was clearly counting on something else. The Duke felt some relief. While Sena did not understand what was happening around, Dion was depressed by the information that the girl considered him just a friend. Having finished the conversation, the Duke was about to leave, leaving the contract on the table. Heading towards the exit, he said that he wanted to give the girl enough time to think about everything, and also added that she could add her own conditions. Sena was extremely surprised by the Duke's behavior. Compared to how he was when they first met, he behaved much better now. Not understanding the reasons for such drastic changes, Sena decided not to think about it. She began studying the contract. Dion watched with a sinking heart as Sena made changes to the contract. Having finished with the amendments, the girl showed the document to Dion to get his opinion. But the guy was still offended by the phrase that they were just friends. The heroine did not quite understand the reason for his spoiled mood. Suddenly, a guy with an offended voice asked if Sena was really going to sign this contract. Hearing a positive answer, he excitedly asked why she refused that time. It was about a case when the Duke wanted to buy Sena's house. The girl replied that now the circumstances have changed, especially since at that time he insisted on buying a house, but now he just wants to rent it for a while. But Dion was still dissatisfied. He continued to mutter that he himself could lend so much money to Sena. Hearing this, the heroine replied that it was not just about money, she needed a Duke. This information greatly shocked the guy. Then, Sena explained that it was the Duke who helped Ellen and drove away the thieves who broke into her house. Also, according to a recently overheard conversation, the man with purple hair is going to visit Ellen again. And if the Duke remains in her house, he will be able to help his neighbor if necessary. Sena recalled that it was Dion who said that Ellen would be better off with the Duke. After listening to Sena's answer, Dion realized that it was because of his words that the girl accepted Carlman's proposal. Looking at the guy's upset face, the heroine did not understand why his mood had deteriorated so much. A few days later, the Duke began to actively move into his new home. At this time, Sena was analyzing the view from the window of the house. The girl was pleased that Ellen's house was clearly visible from there. While she was relieved that the Duke would be able to look after Ellen from there, Sena was also perplexed, not understanding why she was so worried about an ordinary neighbor. She had several assumptions about this, the most plausible of which were that Ellen was the main character of the novel, or that Sena felt bad about the fact that her neighbor had to run away from her terrible family. Her thoughts were interrupted by someone's footsteps. It was the Duke. He said that all his things had already been delivered, and the workers, having finished their work, said goodbye to the mistress of the house. After his lordship's subordinates left, the first thing the heroine did was to remind him of the terms of the contract. Hearing the man's answer that he remembered everything, Sena decided to check how true this was. The Duke was dejected that he had to retell this contract for the 100th time. But still, he began to list the points written there by the heroine. He listed all 7 points in one breath, and at the end he added Sena's condition that if at least one of these points is violated, the contract will be cancelled. Hearing Carlman's answer, Sena cordially praised the Duke, but such praise did not particularly please the guy. A joyful Aaron, who was happy about the move, intervened in the conversation. However, he had a question. Since the assistant saw Dion for the first time, he became interested in who he was. The Duke replied with a grin that it was Sena's friend. For Dion, these words were like a blow to the head. Barely restraining his anger, Dion greeted the Duke with a forced smile. The oppressive atmosphere between them could be felt a mile away. During this time, Aaron told Sena about the schedule for using the house, according to which the Duke plans to stay in the rented house 1 or 2 days a week, and his nights will be there the other days. Having said everything he had planned to say, he said goodbye and hastily left the house. The girl said goodbye to her assistant in bewilderment. She didn't know how to calm Dion and Carlman down. Sena turned to the Duke, trying to stop the conflict, but he ignored her words. She also turned to Dion with a request to stop the dispute, but also to no avail. Realizing that none of the men were listening to her, she had to directly wedge herself between them to get their attention. In order to separate them completely, she asked Dion to leave, since it was already late. Dion was surprised by such a request, but Sena hurried to send him away so that he could go home and get some sleep. She was angry and blamed herself for bringing these two together in one room. The heroine urgently asked to return tomorrow or in a few days, but suddenly noticed that the door did not open. The Duke came to the noise and asked what had happened. Dion was very glad that the door was stuck and he would not be able to go home. And again, these three found themselves in the same room, at the same table. Sena was in prostration. She did not understand how it was even possible for the door not to open. The Duke clarified that not only the door, but also the windows do not open, which creates the feeling that they are inside some kind of barrier. Dion was extremely pleased with the current situation. Thus, 3 people sat at a round table, one of whom was happy, the second was dejected, and the third was angry. The Duke and Sena immediately thought that this could be another demon, and, taking out the device, the heroine decided to test this assumption. They were shocked when their hypothesis was confirmed. None of them expected this. The stone on the device glowed bright red, which meant that a demon was hiding in the house, but how long he had been there was impossible to determine. Seeing the expression on the heroine's face, Dion became worried and asked if she was okay. For Sena, it was a home filled with treasured memories. She swore to herself that she would protect this place. Sena silently stood up from her seat and headed somewhere. Seeing how the girl hit the window with all her might, the guys jumped up from their seats excitedly. The heroine explained her behavior, pointing out that even after such a strong blow, there was not a scratch on the glass, which means only one thing: the demon locked them there, since it is easier to devour live prey that is locked up. After some time, the temperature in the room increased greatly. The heroes turned red from the heat and had difficulty breathing. Sena could barely put together a few words. According to the heroine, it was all arranged by a demon. Hearing that this was a rather rare type of demon, Dion asked how Sena knew about it. The girl replied that she read it in a book. It was about a book that he and Dion found in the library. The Duke did not understand what book he was talking about. Then, Sena said that that book talked about a demon who likes to steam his victims before consuming them. There was also information about the demon that they found in the Duke's house. Noticing the tense atmosphere between Sena and Carlman, Dion brought them water to cool down a little. Having received cold water, the heroine was delighted. When asked where he found the water, Dion sheepishly replied that he had a few tricks up his sleeve. He showed off his magic with pride. Sena was delighted. A guy created fresh water out of nowhere. The water was tasty and cool. While Dion was drinking water, the girl noticed some kind of symbol, similar to a tattoo, that appeared on the man's shoulder. Having refreshed himself, Dion advised the heroine to also drink before the water warmed up. Sena happily thanked Dion. She immediately drank all the water. After that, she felt better. The Duke was dissatisfied, since 1 glass of water was not enough to refresh him. Dion did not like the guy's ungrateful tone, and he said that if the Duke needed water, he should ask politely. Carlman objected to this. For him, it was humiliating. Before the conflict escalated, Sena interrupted them, reminding them that they needed to focus on finding the demon in the house. The heroine said that according to the information from the book, this demon will not come out until they die from the heat. However, Since this was her first time encountering this, she didn't know where the demon might be hiding. All this time, the Duke looked at Sena in admiration. But when they met their eyes, the guy turned away in embarrassment. Then the girl turned to Dion, asking if he knew anything about this demon. The man replied that he knew little about demons, since he had never had to fight a demon. At that moment, Sena noticed that Dion is really strange, because all that is said about him is that he will act like crazy. There are no other rumors about him. Also, although Dion rarely appears in high society, he somehow knows the Duke. Realizing this, she suddenly asked how Carmen and Dion knew each other. Dion replied that he first met the Duke at Sena's house. Carmen answered differently. He said that they had already crossed paths before, and one of his acquaintances said something about him. Dion asked with interest what exactly they told about him. The Duke replied that he had been advised to beware of him. Dion, with an ominous smile, only said that it was clear. Sena got shivers down her spine from such a grin. Having finished the conversation, they went in search of the demon. With each step, the device reacted more and more strongly to the demon. Suddenly, the heroine stumbled. Luckily, Dion caught her before she hit the floor. The heat completely consumed the girl, and she could not even open her eyes. Since the girl was not able to continue on her way, the guys decided to leave her at the wall for now and look around themselves. Despite the fact that one of the clauses in the agreement was a ban on entering other rooms, the Duke suggested that the girl would not mind if they opened this door, since catching the demon was paramount. Dion agreed with him, and together they opened the door to the room. The men entered the room and began a search. Dion began his inspection from the bookshelves. Suddenly, he found an old map. The guy, having forgotten that Sena was not with them, turned to her with a question about why that area on the map was circled. Seeing the Duke fidgeting on the table, Dion suddenly asked if he had seen this creature outside the room. Then the Duke realized that Sena was in danger. At this time, an unknown black aura had already reached the girl. Realizing that the heroine was in danger, the Duke and Dion rushed to her. By that time, the demon had already swallowed Sena. However, there was one problem. The demon's body was invisible to the eye, so it seemed that the girl was floating in the air. The Duke, drawing his sword, walked towards her. Assuming that the heroine was in the monster's stomach, the man tried to determine the location of the head. Having calculated the approximate location, the Duke struck, but he missed and only cut off his tongue. At the same moment, the demon regained visibility, but its tongue grew back. Dion also joined the attacks. He directed an ice magic attack at the demon, but the monster skillfully recovered from all the blows. In the end, he managed to escape. The guys ran after him, but were exhausted before they could catch up with him. Dion and the Duke knew that the longer they delayed, the more likely it was that by the time they found the demon, the girl would already be digested. For better results, they decided to develop a plan first. Dion suggested playing on the monster's hunger and making the Duke a bait, and when he opens his mouth to swallow him, Dion uses his magic. Carmen was obviously not satisfied with this plan, but Dion had no more ideas. After thinking a little, the guys found another way out, to blow up the entire house. However, just imagining Sena's reaction, they immediately discarded this option. While Dion and Carmen were busy generating ideas, the Duke accidentally touched the package of salt. As a result, salt spilled onto the demon's footprints. Then, the Duke noticed that some kind of reaction was happening. Suddenly, he shouted that he had found a solution. Based on the chemical reaction, the Duke realized that the demon was weak to salt. Looking at the floor, Dion also saw that the monster's saliva turned black as soon as it touched the salt. Therefore, if you sprinkle this on the body of a demon, you will be able to see it. All that remains is to decide how this can be realized. Suddenly, Dion had a great idea. And naturally, this did not bode well for the Duke. The plan, as before, was to make Carmen a bait. Sitting in ambush, Dion waited for the demon to appear. We didn't have to wait long. The plan worked like a charm. The demon took the bait. Just as the demon was about to devour the Duke, Dion attacked him. He shoved a huge packet of salt directly into the demon's mouth. While the monster howled in pain, Dion managed to retreat. Standing further away, he watched the demon's reaction. By that time, the Duke had already risen from the floor and was preparing to attack. Drawing his sword, he delivered one precise blow. This time, the Duke was able to cut off the demon's head. Working together, Dion and Carmen managed to defeat the monster. However, it was unclear what happened to Sena. Concerned, Xion walked towards the demon's body. Coming closer, the guys noticed that the tail of the already dead monster twitched. As expected, the demon had regenerative abilities and had already begun to grow a new head. Dion said that such demons have a core, and the only way to kill such a demon is to remove the core from the body or destroy it. To begin with, Dion immobilized the demon's body using ice magic. He also used magic to force him to keep his mouth open. And as usual, he left the dirtiest part of the job to the Duke. According to his plan, Carlman must crawl inside and rescue Sena. The Duke was not happy with this, but still agreed. Suddenly, the ice canes that supported the mouth broke. Suddenly, the demon woke up. Having come to his senses, he immediately tried to swallow the Duke. Dion did not have time to react before the monster had already swallowed Carlman. At that moment, Dion said with a grin that this was why he told the Duke to hurry up. Having swallowed Carlman, the demon tried to free itself. Then Dion prepared another spell, this time using the element of fire. A moment later, the fire completely enveloped the demon's body. Dion continued to throw magical blows. At the same time, he tried to fetter the movement of the monster so that it would not destroy the house. After some time, the Duke found Sena. At that moment, the demon let out a terrible screech and vomited black liquid. The Duke, together with the heroine, managed to get out of the monster's stomach. The demon continued to tremble convulsively. Finally, uttering a terrible scream, he collapsed to the ground. Having immobilized the demon, Dion headed towards Carlman and Sena. A little mockingly, he turned to the Duke and said that he was late. But the Duke managed to rescue not only the heroine, but also pulled out the core. After the core was separated from the body, the demon disappeared forever. This time, making sure that the monster was finished forever, the heroes breathed a sigh of relief. Sena looked the same as before. She was still unconscious and unresponsive to external sounds. Suddenly, she rushed to hug her and asked for a little more time to sleep. Dion tried to wake her, but to no avail. She only squeezed her hands tighter, squeezing the Duke in her arms. This made Dion extremely irritated, and the Duke felt awkward. Realizing that Sena was doing this unconsciously, Dion calmed down a little. He pressed the girl in his arms and said that she should not hug any weirdos, but instead let her hug only him. The Duke could not understand the reason for such actions, but still did not object. After some time, the heroine woke up in an unfamiliar place. A girl in a maid uniform immediately approached her and said with a smile that the heroine had been sleeping for so long that they began to worry. Seeing Sena's bewilderment, the maid clarified that this was the estate of Duke Carlman, and it was his lordship who brought the girl there. Gradually, the heroine remembered that she had lost consciousness because of the demon. The maid explained that the Duke brought the girl here only because the girl fainted, and there was a doctor on the estate. And upon learning that the servants wiped her while she was unconscious, the girl was shocked. Having finished her report, the maid went to draw a bath for Sena. After taking a bath, the heroine put on a pre-prepared dress and left the room. Seeing Sena in such an outfit, Dion was embarrassed and looked away. The girl's beauty made not only Dion, but also the Duke blush. When the guys asked if she was okay, Sena replied that she felt much better. Then Dion asked if she remembered anything after fainting, but the girl didn't remember anything. Hearing the answer, Dion specified his question, asking if this meant that she did not remember hugging the Duke. The girl's face was distorted in surprise. Realizing that Sena did not remember anything, Dion said that she clung to Carlman quite tightly. Very strong, even too strong. Remembering these events once again, the Duke blushed with embarrassment. Sena was speechless from shock. Then she remembered her dream. It turned out that she had confused the Duke with her blanket, and having learned that she had also muttered in her sleep that she didn't want to get up for school, the heroine was completely dumbfounded. She bowed in panic and asked for forgiveness for her actions. The Duke understood everything and also felt awkward. Having finished apologizing, the girl turned to Dion, saying that he should have stopped her at that very second. Hearing the girl's words that it was most likely disgusting, the Duke became a little upset. Sena, misinterpreting the expression on his face, thought that he was angry. Therefore, she again began to bow and ask for forgiveness. Dion laughed secretly. Trying to change the subject, Carlman invited Sena to stay for dinner. Suddenly, the heroine grabbed the Duke, trying to prevent him from leaving. But realizing what she had done, she immediately removed her hands. The point was that she needed to discuss something with the Duke. It was about demons that had already appeared in the capital twice. Given the fact that she was involved in both incidents, Sena urgently asked to reveal all the cards. She wondered why all these demons were appearing near her home, but the Duke still could not tell her. He refused without explanation. He just said that he wanted to figure everything out himself. He also clarified that he needs more time to investigate. However, in order to calm the girl down, the Duke promised to tell her everything as soon as he found out everything. And not only her, Dion too. Daeon accepted the offer, but continued to pretend that he was not particularly interested. As if sensing that the conversation was over, Aaron knocked on the door. Having finished his speech, the Duke left with his assistant. As they walked down the empty corridor, Aaron tried to ask something with his eyes shining. Finally, gathering all his will into a fist, he asked the question of whether there was any close relationship between the Duke and the mistress of the house. The maids were also delighted at the prospect of a new duchess. However, the embarrassed Duke could not answer this question. At this time, Sena and Dion were left alone. Then, Sena, with a concerned tone, asked Dion's opinion, to which the guy replied with an extremely serious tone that he thought that the food would be quite tasty since this was the Duke's house. Hearing this, the enraged heroine clarified that they were talking about demons, to which Dion responded with a laugh that it was just a joke. Sitting down on the sofa, Sena continued to think about how this could happen in the capital. After all, in the entire empire, the capital is the safest place. And all because the most talented magicians, hunters, and scientists joined forces with one goal: to create a protective barrier. And yet the demons somehow managed to get inside. Dion told Sena his thoughts about the Duke not telling them anything. He was sure that this was not due to trust, but something else. For example, with secrets that are already dangerous to even know about. However, even admitting this possibility, Sena was angry, because how could she sit idly by if it was about her house? Dion was pleased with this reaction, because this is exactly the type of Sena he knows. The heroine added that, in addition to everything that has been said, demons are considered the sworn enemies of hunters, and that is why she cannot let everything take its course. While the girl was talking about her intentions to get to the bottom of the truth and destroy all demons, rage, pain, and hatred were visible on her face. So Dion only replied that he understood. Having said this, he stood up from his seat to leave. Sena was surprised, because she thought that the guy would also stay for dinner. But he said goodbye, saying that he had no appetite. The heroine decided to stay in order to continue the conversation with the Duke. After the guy's sudden departure, Sena looked after him with her mouth open, not understanding why Dion so abruptly changed his mind about staying. Then the only reasonable assumption for the heroine was that she was talking about demons, and for Dion, who had never seen them before, they were disgusting creatures. So the guy lost his appetite. But still, the girl was waiting for a warmer farewell. And after such a cold departure, she even thought that Dion might not come to visit again. Sena did not want this meeting to be their last. Suddenly, the girl's thoughts were interrupted by Dion's words that her house was damaged. The heroine was slightly surprised by this news. Then the guy clarified that the house was damaged quite badly. For some time, the girl digested this information in a stupor. Finally realizing what she was talking about, her face contorted in shock and rage. At this time, the Duke was working in his office. However, all the time thinking about Aaron's words, he could not concentrate on the documents. It was all because of his assistant's long tongue. Suddenly, the headmaid came and said that the guests had gone home. Carlman was disappointed that Sena didn't stay for dinner. Having received the owner's permission, the maid bowed and left. At the same time, other young maids stood outside the door, enthusiastically discussing the Duke's relationship with the heroine. After the maid left, Carlman wondered whether he should marry Sena. He couldn't understand it to himself. He remembered how the girl, in a panic, apologized for the hug and said that she would not touch him again. I imagined that Dion and Sena had a close relationship, so I felt like a third wheel. After much thought, he regretted that he had not made a better first impression. Noticing the strange behavior of his master, the subordinate asked what was eating him. At first, the Duke wanted to deny everything, but suddenly changed his mind and asked James to find out what gifts young girls prefer. With the assistant's assumption that the gift was intended for the girl he was looking for, the Duke quickly agreed, since he did not know how to explain his interest in Sena. And only after these words, he suddenly realized that all this time he had never even thought about Ellen. Seeing the Duke's expression, James asked again if it was possible that the gift was for the wrong lady, but Carlman immediately replied that it was for the right one. At the same time, he could not believe that he had forgotten about it. Realizing his mistake, he abruptly stood up from his workplace and headed towards her house. But James reminded that today is not his turn, and according to Aaron, the Duke has a lot of work to do. Hearing about this, Carlman was furious, but still he had to stay to finish the job. Not noticing anything around, the Duke tried to finish all the documents as quickly as possible. Late at night, hearing a knock on the door, Dion went to answer it. The Duke stood on the threshold. Dion was unpleasantly surprised, but still invited him into the house. The girl was cleaning at the time. She explained that at first it was a complete mess, and everything was splattered with demon drool. Looking around, the Duke asked if anything was broken. Sena happily replied that, fortunately, only the chest of drawers. She also enthusiastically reported that she was able to sell the mana stone they extracted from the demon for 400,000 rupees. And she added that Dion helped her with this. The heroine immediately invited Carlman to take his share, but he refused. Then she turned to Dion and asked if he thought it was a little uncomfortable to sleep, but the guy was fine with everything. The Duke was speechless, having misinterpreted their conversation. But the girl's next phrase, that Dion took a little nap because he was tired while helping her, clarified the whole situation. However, Dion immediately noticed the Duke's bewilderment and began to make fun of him. Noticing the two's casual interaction, Sena assumed that they had already become close. Continuing to grin, Dion told Sena that there was no need to worry, as he slept well. The Duke was not surprised by this answer. After all, when the girl suffered from the demon, Dion did not leave her side for a second. Then, he looked as if he was ready to destroy any demon that stood in his way. Now, he looked completely different. It was even difficult to believe that this was the same person. Sena was glad to hear this, because the room she provided had been empty for more than 10 years. When Dion learned about this, he was surprised, because the room was very clean. Sena said that her grandfather used to live there, but now she cleans it regularly, so the room is in good condition. Upon hearing about this, Dion apologized for the inconvenience caused. The heroine sheepishly replied that everything was fine. Carried away by the conversation, they left the Duke aside. Then, Carlman offered to help with the cleaning, since he was also responsible for the damage. The girl was embarrassed to bother the aristocrat with work, but Dion quickly found something for the Duke to do: prepare dinner. Sena tried to stop him, but Dion continued to provoke Carlman with his words. To prove his competence, the Duke agreed. He was determined. Having made a decision, Carlman headed to the kitchen. Standing in front of the cutting board, he didn't even know where to start. Sena was already starting to worry. She offered her help to Carlman. The Duke immediately refused, but the heroine insisted on her own. The Duke, flushed with embarrassment, nevertheless gave in. She said with confidence that she would prepare everything herself. However, the Duke suggested cooking together. An irritated Dion watched all this. The girl started cooking. Remembering that I forgot to add butter, I decided that the order in which the ingredients were added was not very important, and added a huge piece of butter to the pan. While it's cooking, I added a little wine. The Duke turned pale with horror. What the girl cooked was not much like beef stew. The pale Duke asked if this dish should be cooked over low heat, but Sena was sure that it did not really matter, and explained that since they were very hungry, they had to cook on high heat to finish it quickly. Then, the Duke reminded her that she didn't even add beef. Realizing that she had forgotten, she rushed to the meat to also add it to the pan, but the Duke stopped her. He insisted that Sena bring a recipe book. Although the girl was confident in her knowledge, she still went for the book. Looking at the strange slurry, the Duke thought with disgust that they would have to eat it. Seeing that the girl had moved away from the stove, Dion asked if she had finished cooking, but Sena replied that no. The Duke just wanted to look at the recipe book. Watching the girl, Carlman realized that she didn't really care when it came to those things that didn't interest her. Following the recipe, the Duke managed to prepare a wonderful dish. Carlman was proud of his work. Even Dion said it looked delicious. Sena admitted that it turned out better than hers. The Duke was embarrassed by so much praise, and modestly replied that everything worked out only because he followed the recipe from the book. He set the table and called Sena and Dion to eat before it got cold. Dion was the first to sit down at the table, not forgetting to note that unexpectedly for himself, the day had come when he would eat the stew that the Duke himself had prepared. But suddenly, another plate with an unknown substance appeared on the table. Sena proudly announced that it was a stew that she made. Turning pale with disgust, so as not to offend his friend, Dion forced a smile and said that the dish looked good. He dared to try it, and even highly appreciated the heroine's culinary masterpiece. Having finished the tasting, they started dinner. This time, Sena was the first to try the dish the Duke had prepared, and her face showed how delicious it was. Dion doubted the taste, but also tried a spoon. However, the food was so tasty that he involuntarily said it out loud. Sena and Dion praised the Duke's culinary skills and devoured the food on both cheeks. Carlman was pleased to hear this. He said with a smile that there was still a lot left in the pan, and they could help themselves. The Duke was happy to share the meal with someone else. After all, he usually eats alone, since he has no friends or family. After a delicious dinner, Sena was in high spirits. She sincerely praised the Duke, saying that he was really good at everything. After finishing their meal, the heroes went for a walk, because at night the city comes to life in a new way. Leaving the house, Sena immediately regretted that she had not gone alone. After all, Carlman and Dion, like little children, looked around in admiration and each time asked what it was and what it was for. When Sena warned them to be careful, as it is easy to get lost here, the men unanimously replied that everything was fine. They were not children. The heroine was thinking about the carpet she had ordered from the store and the list of things that still needed to be bought, while Dion and the Duke were enjoying their walk. Seeing the lamp, the girl remembered that the demon had broken her lamp and she needed to buy a new one. Sena approached the merchant to find out about the prices. But before she could say anything, Zion suddenly pointed to the statue and asked what it was. The seller replied that it was a dragon, and the figurine is called a dragon, guarding the monostone. The heroine did not particularly appreciate the work of art, while Dion was delighted. Having noticed a potential buyer, the merchant immediately began talking about the figurine. Upon learning that it was handmade, Dion admiringly approached to examine the details. Noticing the guy's shining eyes, the merchant told a legend about dragons, which says that they can use magic. Hearing this story, Dion asked how this could be if everyone knew that only demons use magic. Then the merchant spoke about his hypothesis that perhaps the demons are actually dragons, and although people do not like demons, they still use their magic. And in order to bestow magic on people, there had to come a moment when the two races would somehow make contact. And according to his theory, the dragons did just that. After all, in all fairy tales, dragons always behave friendly towards people. It is then possible that the demons were divided in their opinions, and as a result, some decided to remain demons because they did not like humans, and the rest chose to coexist with humans, turning into dragons. Based on all that has been said, the merchant assumed that not all demons are evil and vicious. Daeon, seriously analyzing the merchant's words, said that the temple would not approve of such an idea. Sena, on the other hand, did not feel the slightest interest in dragons, since she had never met them. The conversation seemed a little dangerous, so the Duke looked around, hoping that no one could hear them. However, Dion thought it sounded plausible. This phrase greatly surprised Sena, but the merchant was glad that he had found a like-minded person. Dion thought the salesman's theory was quite interesting. He continued to think with admiration about the almighty dragons, not noticing the fierce look of the heroine. Realizing that Dion could no longer be convinced, Sena gave up. She decided to buy this dragon lamp. Dion was incredibly happy, while Sena felt like a mother who indulges the whims of her spoiled child. Suddenly, the girl noticed that there were too many people on the street. The satisfied merchant said that most likely it was because of the play, which would take place nearby, and advised him to watch it too. After hearing about the play, Sena became interested. The play was about a girl who married a man only because he paid off all her family's debts. But Ulysses lay motionless in bed and did not react to his wife's words. Then the girl pulled out the blanket and saw that her husband was wounded. She was terrified and didn't know what to do. Ulysses asked Aaliyah to find the one who killed him, since he could not see their faces. At that moment, the maid behind the door announced that her sisters had come to see the master. Ayla panicked, because if the ladies caught her in such a situation, they would think that she had killed her husband. Then the young girl decided to pretend to be her husband. Entering the room, the arrogant ladies said that they had just come to check on their brother and decided to check if everything was okay with him. Seeing that the sisters did not understand anything, Isla felt relieved. But suddenly, a man burst into the room, shouting that this marriage must be dissolved. There was a very good reason for this, because Ulysses is, in fact, Ailey's long-lost younger brother. Sena didn't even like the book, and the play wasn't particularly interesting to her. However, her two friends were completely caught up in this terrible soap opera. The girl invited them without any expectations. She didn't even think that they would like it so much. While everyone was absorbed in the plot, the girl recalled how 10 years ago she watched the same play with her grandparents. That time she was unhappy because she was brought to the theater instead of a toy. The heroine regretted that she had behaved this way then. She thought that she should have smiled more often that day. Noticing the sadness on Sena's face, Dion asked what was wrong. Sena replied that everything was fine, and the performance was quite good. But Dion immediately realized that this was a lie. Then the girl decided to change the topic and asked if the guy was interested in killing Ulysses. Dion was interested, but he didn't want Sena to tell everything, because then it wouldn't be interesting to watch further. Sena decided to play a little joke on her friend and pretended that she was going to name the killer. She had not felt so easy and cheerful for a long time. However, all this time someone was watching them, and they didn't even notice. Another bright morning arrived. Sena was beside herself with rage. Carlman and Dion brought books to the table and read during breakfast. During this time, the men managed to get along well. Even after putting away the books, they continued to discuss what they had read. They were reading novels from the play they saw last night. Hearing that the heroine was going to the association, the Duke and Dion stood up to accompany her to the door. Hearing their instructions, the girl recalled the days when her grandparents saw her off. From these memories, the heroine involuntarily smiled. For the first time in a long time, she was so happy. Arriving at the guild, Sena found out that Anna was bored. The administrator began to complain that there had been no work at all lately. Sena's face was distorted in surprise, since in the morning Anna herself called her, saying that she wanted to discuss something important. But in reality, it turned out that she just needed to talk to someone. Then, Sena remembered that the last time she came in, they had a lot of work to do. Anna replied that this was true, but compared to last year, there was much less of it. And now, when people have sorted out the remaining orders, it is practically empty. The administrator had a presentiment that it would be extremely boring in winter, and that's why she has no work for Sena at all. Then the heroine realized that Anna had wanted to talk about this from the very beginning, since she was sorry that she did not have work for Sena. Sena reassured her friend with a smile, saying that everything was fine, especially since she recently managed to earn a decent amount of money. Anna was happy for the heroine and asked how exactly she managed to earn money. The heroine spoke in detail about her source of income. However, upon hearing the answer, Anna decided that Sena was not all right in her head. More precisely, this is what presumably would have happened if Sena had told it like it was. Suddenly, the girl was lost in her thoughts, because if you think about it, the Duke was staying at the heroine's house to protect Ellen, and that man with purple hair said that he would come to see Ellen. Sena suddenly realized that she had forgotten to warn Ellen about the danger. Noticing her friend's suddenly pale face, Anna became worried. Seeing such a reaction to her question about earnings, the administrator worriedly asked whether Sena had taken out a loan or was gambling. But all the options were wrong. Sena reassured her friend, saying that there was nothing like that and she shouldn't worry. Then Anna asked if this meant that the heroine would not take orders for now. Having heard that, most likely yes, since she was currently busy, the administrator immediately assumed that it was because of Dion Fravel. She delightedly wanted to talk about the rumors that had reached her, but the heroine immediately stopped her. She said it was better to hear everything directly from first hand. Sena believed that it would be a waste of time to listen to yet another ridiculous rumor. Suddenly, someone called Sena. Hearing the voice, the heroine turned around and looked. It was a hunter with short black hair and blue eyes. Robin was glad that he met Sena. He happily said that he wanted to share great news with her. Coming closer, he showed the heroine some paper. He happily explained in full pants that this was their new order. Everyone except Sena was delighted with this news. She planned to return home as soon as possible. The heroine found herself in a room where a piercing, high, and heartbreaking sound was heard. The policeman, who was trying to calm the crying baby, greeted Sena. Seeing that the girl came to help, he immediately noted that she was very similar to her grandfather, who was also a very kind person. In any case, the heroine was only interested in one thing: what was happening there, and why the police department has become a haven for the lost. The police could not calm the children down. Every single one of them cried. And finally, one of the officers could not stand it and turned to Sena with a request for help. She asked to hand over the child to her. The heroine explained that the child was crying because the man was holding him incorrectly. Having said this, she showed how to hold it. Once in her arms, the child immediately calmed down. One of the police officers praised her for her good job. Sena laughed it off by asking, "Since when did hunters start doing this kind of work?" After some time, through joint efforts, we managed to get everyone to sleep. While the hunters were watching the kids, Robin asked Sena if she had any idea whose children these were. The girl replied that it was impossible to understand this just by looking at the children. Robin suggested that these could be the children of the heroine's acquaintances, for example, friends of her grandfather. But she replied that she had not heard anything like that. Then Robin said that he found one of the children crying on the street, and when he brought him to the police department, there were already 4 of them, but none of the policemen knew how to deal with children, so he had to ask the association for help. But the children's parents never showed up. Considering the fact that the children were left on the street, they most likely will not appear. However, no matter how difficult times were, it is difficult to believe that 5 children could be thrown away overnight. It didn't look like a mere coincidence. Returning home, she continued to worry about the children. At the same time, she calmed herself down with the thoughts that she had already helped in any way she could. Finally, she reached her house. Assuming that the Duke and Dion were waiting inside, she happily opened the door. Entering home, she immediately heard Dion's voice, who said that she was late. However, something was wrong. Looking at the guy, she noticed that he had turned into a child. And not only him, Carlman was also in the form of a child. They themselves did not understand how this happened. The guy said that while they were reading the books, at some point they became younger. Looking at them, Sena couldn't help but laugh. The Duke and Dion were despondent. The funny thing was that they were so absorbed in the novel that they didn't even notice how they became younger. Dion confirmed that this was all true. Sena was touched by the new appearance of her friends. She joyfully invited Dion to take part in some children's beauty contest, but little Dion did not like the idea. Sena continued to ask permission to pat his cheeks at least once. Before his turn came, the Duke asked him to stop mocking and think about the reasons for what happened. Having calmed down a little, Sena began to think seriously. She also remembered the children at the police station. The Duke then suggested that it might be magic, but Dion said that he would understand if it were so. In this case, there is only one option left. This is the work of a demon. According to Sena, there is a demon capable of this, but this is considered a legend, since they are as rare as dragons. Another red flag was that this was the 3rd time the demon had appeared near Sena's house. Since this demon was mentioned in Elliot Raffman's book, the heroine decided to go to the library in the morning and reread it again. Dion and Carlman could not return home in such guises. Therefore, Sena invited them to stay in her house for a while. First thing in the morning, the heroine brought baby clothes for the guys. However, due to her haste, she made a mistake with Dion's size. Visually, the Duke looked about 12 years old, and Dion looked about 7. Sena had fun helping Dion get dressed. Suddenly, someone burst into the house. The Duke immediately recognized the man's voice. It was Aaron, who ran to Sena in search of his master. The heroine tried to lie something so as not to give the Duke away, but she was not very good at it. The assistant was worried that the Duke might again get into some kind of trouble, because of which he could be arrested. But Sena tried to calm him down, saying that his lordship would not fall into the same hole twice. Then Aaron happily assumed that the Duke had gone on vacation. The girl didn't even know what to answer to this. However, the assistant did not wait for an answer at all. Having convinced himself that the boss was on vacation, he decided that this was his chance to rest. After Aaron left, the evil Duke came out of hiding. Then, Sena suggested simply telling Aaron the truth. But for the aristocrat, it was a matter of honor. The Duke supposedly knew that as soon as the assistant saw him, he would die of emotion. Dion began to laugh secretly. They started nagging again, like real children. Sena, watching them, couldn't understand if it was because they had become children. She ended up intervening in the argument and stopping them. The heroine reminded them that they needed to go to the library. Arriving at the library, they began to search for information in the book together. It turned out that they were dealing with an S-rank demon, which is called Reveolt, and has the ability to influence the psyche. According to the book, this demon likes to cast curses just for fun. Those affected by the curse become younger, physically and mentally. They are getting younger and younger. And if the curse is not lifted, then death awaits them. Sena was horrified by such prospects. Dion tried to calm her down, saying that everything would be fine with him and the Duke. But these words didn't make Sena feel any better. Then Dion showed the heroine part of the text, where it was written that the Reveolta spell uses the demon's mana. Therefore, he cannot influence the priests. Moreover, mages and those who are able to use aura undergo minor changes. Those who use aura stop getting younger as soon as they reach adolescence, while magicians stop getting younger as soon as they become children. That is why Dion and the Duke stopped getting younger, which means that they are not in danger of death. It also said that he was once a pet of demons. Anyone who pets Reveolta immediately falls under his influence. Therefore, it is better to stay away from him, even if he looks like a cute animal. Sena paid special attention to the words about not petting him. After all, no normal person can get close to a demon, no matter how nice he is. Then Dion and the Duke remembered the cat they were petting. It was a snow-white stray cat. Having received at least some clue, they went in search of the demon. Sena, Dion, and Carlman went through all the white street cats to find the monster. But there was something else strange. Although demons usually kill people, all the children in the police department were safe, without any injuries. Therefore, this demon is really just having fun. While Sena and the Duke were discussing this issue, Dion caught another white cat. It was a huge cat with blue eyes, but this one turned out to be wrong. Then, Sena suggested asking the hunters for help. But the Duke wanted to keep the penetration of demons into the capital a secret. The heroine clarified that you can contact a specific person. She said that since Robin was already in the know, she could help them. Dion asked who Robin is and why he knows everything, but Sena did not have time to answer, as they were interrupted by Ellen. She approached in a friendly manner to say hello, and in her hands was a white cat. During the tea party, all three of them were staring at a suspicious cat. Noticing their strange looks, the neighbor asked what happened. While Sena tried to get out, the Duke and Dion watched the cat with shining eyes. Suddenly, Dion attacked the cat. However, the cat turned out to be more agile and did not get caught. Carlman did not miss the opportunity to grin. He rushed after the cat to catch it, thereby showing his superiority. The Duke almost reached his pet. However, the cat successfully dodged this time too. The Duke also failed to catch the demon. This time it was Dion who grinned. Ellen watched the children, thinking they were just playing. Sena also pretended that they were just children. She was alone, tormented by one question: why the Reveolt spell did not work on Ellen. According to the book on demons, this is only possible if Ellen has incredible holy power. Since the neighbor was the main character of a short story from a past life, Sena was sure that everything was so. The guys spent all this time unsuccessfully chasing the demon. They dropped almost all the chairs and the table, but they couldn't even touch the cat. Seeing the mess the children made, Ellen was shocked. Sena scolded them for inappropriate behavior in someone else's house. In this chaos, only the cat sat calmly, as if what was happening had nothing to do with him. From the sudden cry, Dion's eyes filled with tears. Sena did not expect this. In a panic, she did not know what to say or how to calm the boy down. Dion could barely hold back his tears. The Duke was also shocked by Dion's reaction. Not knowing how to calm Dion down, she told him to follow Sasha's example. She explained to Carlman that she had to come up with a new name for him so that Ellen wouldn't guess anything. The Duke was unhappy with the new name. Dion could barely hold back his tears. The cat seemed to be mocking everyone. Looking at these three, Sena didn't know what to do. She didn't understand what was expected of her. Suddenly, the cat ran away somewhere. He ran around the whole room, deliberately teasing the guys. Helen also didn't know how she could help. Sena continued to pretend that these were her cousins. Only now she began to understand how difficult it is for mothers to look after their children. Suddenly, Ellen told the heroine that her cousins were very cute and like her, and she clarified that they had similar views, which sounded extremely implausible. Suddenly, the cat opened the door himself. Seeing this, Ellen assumed that he wanted to go play. Sena remembered their conversation in the library. That book said it was a demon, but it looks like a regular cat. Then they decided to check all the cats in the city. But the demon also has the ability to change his appearance. And also in the book, it was indicated that the method of capturing Reviolte was slightly different from others. The method was simple enough. To catch it, you had to play with it as long as possible. However, you need to play as much as Reviolte himself wants. And since the author had never encountered such a demon, he could not write how long it took. The author advised readers to check this themselves. This is where the memories end. And back to the harsh reality, where these three are still chasing the cat. Dion continued to address the Duke as Sasha. Rashid got angry every time and told him not to call him that again. At this time, Sena was almost exhausted, as they had been running for several hours. The girl shouted after Dion and Carlman so that they should not just chase the demon, but try to drive him into a corner. However, the guys were already far enough away and didn't hear. Barely breathing, Sena shouted after them so that they would at least listen to what she was saying. Eventually, her strength gave out and she stopped. Looking around, she realized that she was in an abandoned area and assumed that the demon had lured them there on purpose. Suddenly, children's voices were heard, but it was not the Duke and Dion. While she was looking around in search of the source of the sound, something flew past her at high speed. This something seemed to be drawing a circle around Sena at great speed. At some point, the sounds of children's voices enveloped her from all sides. Suddenly, the same cat appeared in front of her, slowly approaching Sena and offering to play together. The girl was horrified when she heard her name from the mouth of the demon. But the cat continued to look at her with an innocent look. Suddenly, he ran away again. The girl didn't even have time to do anything. The heroine tried in every possible way to calm herself so as not to succumb to fear. The demon kept repeating that Sena should play with him. Realizing that there was no other way out, the enraged girl decided to accept the offer. Having made a decision, she ran after the cat. The demon, continuing to run away, threatened Seiyan with the lives of the boys. He said that if the girl slowed down, he would eat them both. Having reached some abandoned houses, Sena stopped abruptly. The unconscious body of the little Duke floated in the sky. The demon took pleasure in seeing Sena suffer. Seeing the girl's concern, he lifted the boy even higher. The heroine tried to shout to the Duke. Finally, Carlman opened his eyes. Realizing that he was in zero gravity, the boy was very scared. He looked around, trying to understand what was happening. The demon was having fun, moving his body with the help of magic. Reviolte then abruptly lifted and then let go of the Duke. Sena ran to the Duke in a cold sweat, so that if she fell, she would catch him. The bodies of her dead comrades stood before her eyes, those who left her forever. She didn't want to experience the feelings again when people close to you die right before your eyes. Whatever she did, she had to save Sena the Duke. But she didn't have time this time either. The body fell to the ground with a crash. Seeing the little Duke lying on the floor, Sena felt horror. She fell to her knees in a stupor. Grief overwhelmed her head. She reproached herself for being weak this time too. Suddenly, Dion's voice came from behind her. Little Dion, with a mocking tone, again called the Duke Sasha and asked why he was hanging there. Using magic, he lifted the Duke up again. Carlman was furious because he had already told him many times not to call him by that name. Dion recalled that it was only thanks to him that the Duke was still alive. And now, he said with a grin, that since he had already saved the Duke, it was time to cancel his magic. After canceling the magic, Carlman plopped down on the ground again. The demon, watching them from the side, grinned. Having finished his fun, the cat said goodbye and left. Sena rushed after him. This time she decided to use a mana stone. The demon was sure that this time he would be able to escape. However, the heroine unexpectedly threw a stone at him. The mana stone exploded and caused significant damage to the demon. The cat lost consciousness. While he was immobilized, Sena calmly approached. Having finally reached him, the girl could not believe her eyes, because this was an S-rank demon and he could not get caught so easily. Her fears were confirmed. The demon was just pretending. Suddenly he started talking. He said that he had not seen Sena for a long time and asked if she was still looking for that thing. The girl was shocked that the demon knew her, but Reviolte did not explain anything, only said that he would fulfill one of her wishes, because she managed to win one of his games. The stunned girl continued to ask how he knew her, but the demon said that he would answer this question only if the girl used her desire to find out the answer. Then Sena refused and made a wish for everyone to return to normal. Having fulfilled his promise, the demon left. By that time, Carlman and Dion had caught up with Sena, but despite the fact that the demon had to lift the spell, they were still small. Hearing Reviolta's answer, that the girl, when making a wish, did not indicate that she wanted everything to return to normal right now, the heroine flew into a rage. In parting, the demon said that he always keeps his words and disappeared. After this, the Duke asked Sena what happened. It was difficult for the girl to explain everything, but one thing was clear: it was all over. Suddenly, something happened to Dion. He lost consciousness. His face looked painful. He woke up already at home. Next to him was a worried Sena. Confused, he looked away and explained that it was just a fever. According to him, it's common for him to use too much mana. All he needed to recover was some sleep. Suddenly, Sena asked if he wasn't curious. After all this time, the heroine was tormented by the question of why demons continue to appear near her house. Moreover, this time Dion suffered. But from all that was said, the guy only emphasized that Sena was worried about him. The girl was dumbfounded by this turn of events. She didn't understand how Dion didn't realize he could have died. But the guy was in seventh heaven just because Sena cared about him so much. Looking at him, the heroine got the feeling that the guy had no sense of self-preservation. Taking advantage of the fact that he was now in the body of a child, Dion laid his head on Sena's lap. Excusing himself by saying that he was sick, he asked to be allowed to lie there for a little while. Looking at him, Sena thought that now Dion would really act like a little child. That's why she decided today to let him do as he wanted. Sitting like this with Dion, she remembered her cousins. She hadn't seen them for a long time. The last time they saw each other was at their grandfather's funeral. At first they came often, but after a quarrel between grandfather and aunt over the rights to the house, they stopped coming. Thinking about them, Sena couldn't help but wonder if everything was okay with them. Hearing the heroine's story, Dion said that he also remembered the past, about the time when he was about 7 years old. At that time, his mother passed away. Hearing about this, Sena was petrified. She did not know what to say and only expressed her condolences. To console him, she reminded him that he still had his father. However, Dion said that he had not seen him for a long time, but he didn't miss him, since he was never a worthy husband and a good father. At the same time, Dion partly understood his father, because he had a lot to do, but Sena didn't understand. She believed that the boss was to blame for his son. When asked by Dion whether the heroine knows his father well, Sena replied that not very well. She saw him only twice, and both meetings were not pleasant. Hearing about this, Dion looked at Sena with his big, interested eyes in such a way that even without words, it was clear that he wanted to know the details. Since it was not a secret, she decided to tell Dion. She said that the first time she met the head of the guild was when her parents disappeared. The first person to inform her of her parents' disappearance, due to an accident during a mission, was her grandfather's colleague. The second who brought this news was the knight, and the third was the boss. The heroine realized how bad everything was as soon as she saw the face of the head of the guild. He regretted that they could no longer continue the investigation. Having finished her story, she added that, as she had said earlier, the meeting was not pleasant. Looking at Dion, the girl realized that this was the first time they communicated like this. They ate together. We spent quite a lot of time together, but this was their first sincere conversation, even though at the very beginning, she did not want to get close to him out of the purest awakenings. Now, the guy has become not just a friend for Sena, but a rather close friend. In any case, the heroine believed that, under those circumstances, the head of the guild did everything in his power. After listening to Sena's story, Dion turned to the Duke, who was lying on another sofa. Sena thought that he was already asleep, but Dion insistently asked him to tell about himself. But Carlman didn't want to. Dion tried to provoke him, but he did not succumb and suggested going to bed so that in the morning they could go to the library again to look for information about Reviolta, because they never returned to their real appearance. However, Dion didn't really care. In contrast, the Duke urgently needed to return to his age because he had quite a lot to do besides managing the duchy. He was very depressed that while he was in the body of a child, work continued to accumulate. Sena tried to calm him down by saying that his parents would probably take care of the affairs of the duchy in his absence, but Carlman interrupted her, saying that they had died, and all the relatives were also dead. Sena again stepped on another mine. She froze in place, not knowing what to say. But the Duke reassured her by saying that everything was fine. In order to change the topic, the heroine said that tomorrow they would definitely find all the necessary information in the library, but now they should go to sleep. Then the Duke, realizing Sena's uncomfortable position, asked how she was going to sleep. In order not to disturb Dion and not to disturb Carlman, she replied that she could easily not sleep even for 3 days. The Duke also could not sleep. He decided to talk a little with the heroine and asked if she remembered that day, the day he encountered a nightmare. He said it was his cousin. More precisely, she was the daughter of the man who tried to kill him. It was because of his uncle that Carlman could not feel safe in his own estate. Only a few people supported him, and only thanks to them, the Duke managed to survive. However, his relatives tried to kill even those few who took his side. Then the young Duke realized that he must defend himself on his own. A lot has happened since then, but it was not the Duke who killed Serena. His uncle did this because he believed that his family would rather die than become powerless slaves. However, since everything happened precisely because of him, Carlman could not consider himself completely innocent. The story shocked Sena. Having finished his story, the Duke added that the heroine should not worry about him taking her house by force. Sena just nodded in response, but suddenly he felt alarmed. Not understanding why the Duke suddenly started talking about the house, Carlman clarified that he knows about the rumors that are circulating about him, and that is why he says that there is no need to worry so much. Sena had long considered him a decent person, but she was upset by the fact that he did not talk about the reasons for the appearance of demons in the capital. In order to reassure the heroine, he even swore that he would not harm people without a particular reason. After these words, Sena realized that all this time, the Duke was worried that she was not comfortable around him. Then she asked him if he told the secret about his uncle, just to calm her down. The Duke did not answer directly, but only said that this was not a secret, since the entire elite knew about it. And yet the heroine was sure that it was not easy for Carlman to talk about this. After thinking a little, he said that it seemed to him that the girl was afraid of him, because she even said that she would not approach him again. But the girl didn't remember anything like that. The Duke clarified that it was in his mansion. Realizing that the girl really didn't remember, he embarrassedly asked her to forget about everything he had just said. He was furious that he had been worrying all this time for nothing. The girl tried to calm the Duke, but he still felt awkward. Suddenly, Sena called Carlman. She smiled and thanked the Duke for his trust and for telling him what happened then. The Duke was embarrassed by such words. Then, Sena asked why he didn't go to the room to sleep, because the sofa was probably uncomfortable. Sena began to talk about the importance of a good rest and promised to wake her up immediately if she heard the slightest noise. Listening to the heroine's long lectures, the Duke asked if she really saw him as a child. Having received no answer, he decided to live up to his appearance and moved closer to Sena. He settled down next to the girl and said that he would sleep there. Sena did not object, so they fell asleep in warmth and comfort. Morning has come. That night, Sena still fell asleep. The half-asleep girl felt someone's hair in her hand. Opening her eyes, she saw Dion's face in front of her. The heroine was stunned. She was speechless from surprise. Besides, the guy was already normal. The extremely surprised heroine asked why she was on the bed. Dion replied that he brought her there because he thought she was not comfortable on the sofa. He was about to leave immediately, but the girl did not let go of his hair. Hearing this, the girl abruptly removed her hand and was about to move away. But Dion grabbed her other hand and said that the Duke had also returned to his age and had gone after Aaron. This meant that only Dion and Sena remained in the house. The guy invited the girl to breakfast, but the joint breakfast did not work out. Sena had to have breakfast with Robin, listening to his stories. Sometimes she made some comments so as not to seem rude. However, she only thought that Dion had left without breakfast due to urgent matters. And although she was counting on a quiet meal, she ran into Robin. After hearing Robin's stories, Sena realized that Reviolte had fixed everything by making everyone think they had passed out from drinking. In this situation, it's true that the easiest way was to blame alcohol for everything. Robin was sure that he drank a lot due to lack of work. He said that he was thinking about returning to his hometown, especially since they promised him a job there. Sena supported his idea, but Robin turned to Sena with an unexpected proposal. He invited the heroine to go there together. Robin turned red as a tomato at his own words. Sena didn't understand why she should go there. The guy tried to somehow get out, saying that there he could help her find a job. He also began to talk about the city itself and its merits. He even talked about the local climate. But even such a long speech failed to convince Sena. She gave a clear refusal because she has unfinished business. The upset guy apologized for not taking her circumstances into account. Since they finished eating, Sena suggested leaving already. After leaving the restaurant, they continued to walk together and talk. Suddenly, Sena smelled the delicious smell of livers and immediately thought of buying some for the Duke and Dion. Noticing the girl's intentions, Robin offered to buy it for her. But Dion suddenly appeared and said that it was not worth it, since he would buy it himself. Robin was startled by surprise. Sena immediately approached Dion and talked to him. Seeing their casual conversation, Robin asked who he was. Then Sena introduced them to each other. Dion immediately remembered Robin's name. They sealed their acquaintance with a handshake and exchanged pleasantries. Suddenly, Sena noticed that Dion's hair was disheveled. Out of habit, she helped correct them, while at the same time, taking advantage of the situation, Dion proudly showed Robin how close he and the heroine were. To Robin, they looked like a couple in love. Without missing an opportunity, Dion noted that Sena had brushed him well in the morning. The words reached their destination, and, as expected, Robin misinterpreted them. To finally finish off his opponent, Dion proudly declared that in the morning, he and Sena were together. Technically, this was not a lie, so the girl did not deny anything. When Dion asked why she wanted to buy cookies, the heroine replied that she was going to treat him and Sasha. Hearing another man's name, Robin was completely confused. All his plans collapsed overnight. He considered himself Sena's closest person. However, it was now obvious that this was not the case. Next to Dion, she smiled brightly. Unable to withstand this atmosphere, Robin ran away. He mentally said goodbye to the heroine and wished her happiness. Sena was the only one who did not understand the reason for such an act. The next day, Sena learned from Anna that Robin had gotten drunk and was crying his eyes out. But Sena had no idea why he was suffering so much. Based on yesterday's conversation, the girl suggested that Robin was upset about ending his career. However, this was definitely not the case. There was some commotion in the association. The hunters were excitedly discussing something. Suddenly, Dale and Isabella Fravel entered the guild. Everyone was surprised by the sudden visit of the head. Even Anna didn't know why they came. Sena and Anna began to jokingly divide the association's property in case it was suddenly closed. In Sena's eyes, Dale looked like a terrible person. She still remembered Dion's words that he didn't even come to his own wife's funeral. Dion was nothing like him, and Sena was happy about it. Suddenly, Anna remembered the reason why she called the heroine. The administrator offered her a good job with decent pay, but Sena tried to politely refuse, since the money that the Duke pays for rent is quite enough for her. However, Anna clarified that the client asked her specifically, so it would not be possible to transfer the order to someone else. Sena suggested that the customer might be some kind of hermit, but her friend calmed her down, saying that it was the other way around. Hearing the employer's name, Sena blushed with happiness. It turned out to be Owen, an S-class hunter. Sena has long admired him, because he is one of the best hunters who has not failed more than one task, as well as the youngest hunter to reach this rank. He is not just a scientist, but a world-recognized archaeologist. He is adored by both hunters and ordinary people. Sena was delighted, but still did not understand why such a person would hire her. The documents said that he needed a hunter who knew Polician. However, Sena was not very confident in her knowledge of the Polician language, but she was deeply touched that Owen appreciated her skills and chose her. She was proud that she was chosen out of everyone. Sena believed that working with Owen was a gift from God. Deciding to tease her friend, Anna took the documents back, since Sena was going to refuse. But the heroine immediately stopped her, enthusiastically informing her that she was accepting the order. Having signed all the documents, she headed to the meeting with the customer. Owen lived in a huge mansion. The butler greeted her at the entrance. He politely invited the guest home. For Sena, such treatment was a little unusual. The butler escorted the heroine to his master. There were many statues placed in the corridor, and they were all directed as if they were watching passers-by. This made it creepy. The butler announced that he would escort Sena to Owen's office. Suddenly, the heroine spotted a huge picture on the wall, which depicted a young girl with golden hair and eyes. And at her feet lay the corpses of killed little demons. The girl was stunned to see demons in the picture. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a man wearing a skull mask appeared next to her. The girl was taken by surprise, but the guy was amused by her reaction. Taking off his mask, Owen apologized and introduced himself. The girl also introduced herself and thanked her for the invitation. Looking at him again, she remembered something. He's one of the contenders for the male lead she saw on the cover. Owen acted kindly towards Sana. Having finished with the greeting, they settled down in the office. All this time, the heroine's head was filled with the question of how it happened that the contender for the leading male role was dating her, and not Ellen. She no longer wanted to interfere with the original plot. Her thoughts were interrupted by Owen's words that he had always wanted to meet her. He said that he liked the stories of her exploits during the expedition to Scalo, and the guy was also impressed to learn that Sana fought the demon all night to protect her wounded friends. The heroine was glad to know that such a high-ranking hunter treated her with respect. Thanks to that incident with the demon, she was promoted to C rank, but immediately after that, she was demoted again. Owen had also heard of Sana's many nicknames. However, among all the nicknames, Sana disliked it most when she was called immortal. She thought it was childish, because she was just a little stronger and recovered faster than others. But Owen, on the contrary, considered these qualities exceptional and was confident that Sana could achieve the same rank as him. However, the heroine was not confident in her abilities. Suddenly, the guy asked if she was interested in ancient ruins, to which Sana honestly answered that she was not. Owen thought exploring ancient ruins could be a lot of fun, but Sana knew that for this type of work, you need to have financial stability. Hearing this, Owen asked if she didn't have someone who could support her, but the girl didn't understand who she was talking about. Then the guy directly said that he meant Duke Carlman. Owen suggested that he would be happy to help Sana, but the girl directly said that she would not accept his help. After all, for her, he is just an acquaintance. Hearing this answer, Owen felt relieved and said that the reason he called her was because he was interested in her, but he is also interested in Duke Carlman. After this phrase, all her fantasies were shattered. She decided to ask directly whether Owen needed financial support from the Duke, but he didn't need investments. There was another very important question. Owen asked Sana if she had any encounters with the creatures while she was with the Duke, but realizing that Carlman was trying to keep it a secret, she lied, saying that she had never encountered it. Owen didn't expect this answer. Sana was confused, not understanding how the hunter could know about this, even if the investigation department was not in the know. There was silence for some time. Owen spoke first. He wanted to tell the heroine an old story. Running his hand through the books, he was looking for a specific book. Finding the book he needed, he took it out and opened it. The girl was dumbfounded that in such a situation, Owen decided to read some kind of story. And so he began his story. History said that long ago there were demons who opened the gates of hell and entered this earth, where they took pleasure in human torment. Some were physically hurt. Others were pushed towards their own downfall. They liked to turn people against each other in order to lead them to death. They also brought hellish evil into this world. This evil force polluted the earth and modified its flora and fauna, as a result of which creatures appeared that are commonly called creatures. Demonic power also affected people. Some lost their minds and turned into creatures themselves. Others absorbed the power and became magicians. And the latter, capable of purifying demonic energy, became priests. The priests managed to exterminate most of the demons, but they could not find a way to destroy the demonic commanders. Therefore, they decided to seal the souls of the 33 high demons in the sacred empire. These 33 souls are still securely sealed there to this day, but recently, 3 of those souls disappeared without a trace. Owen said that he was tracking down 3 escaped demons at the request of the empire. It is known that there were 5 families who helped the priests seal away the higher demons. They are the only ones in the empire who know about the seal and the only ones who can access them, and the Carlman family is one of these 5. But the story turned out to be too long, and Sana fell asleep before she could finish listening. Hearing her name, she immediately woke up. Seeing Sana sleeping, Owen assumed that his story was too boring. But Sana tried to apologize by saying that she had simply never been interested in legends. She kept yawning and saying that everything was fine. But Owen wasn't going to end there. He brought the next book for the second story. Sana hoped that the stories were already over. The next story was that creatures appear from the power of demons, so they tend to follow them, like children following their parents. Sena already automatically agreed with everything. If only the story would end quickly. Owen continued his story, according to the book. Even when sealed, demons are able to summon creatures. That's why, if Duke Carlman has one of these stones, then the creatures will definitely appear next to him. Owen also said that he is looking for more than just demons, but also a priestess. Sena immediately understood who he was talking about. Owen also noticed her interest. He suggested listening to the next story, which she would definitely like. The girl realized that she had made a mistake, and her facial expression gave her away. It was written all over Owen's face that Sena had been caught. The heroine was already trying to come up with excuses, expecting a barrage of questions from the hunter, but he didn't ask anything. Owen began his tale of the first priestess who sacrificed herself to seal away the 33 greater demons, and this seal continues to hold them back to this day. However, there is one caveat. Each generation necessarily has its own priestess, and her blood is the only way to break the seal. According to information, Duke Carlman is searching for a certain woman, and if he plans to get rid of the seals, then he needs to get rid of him. This is for the greater good. Hearing the last phrase, the girl jumped out of her seat and repeated once again that she knew nothing. Then Owen suggested that she just ask him directly. The girl was shocked. She was furious, because the hunter ignored everything she said. Realizing that further conversation made no sense, Sena said goodbye and headed towards the exit. Owen also said goodbye to her with a smile. One of the sheets about demons fell right in front of Sena. It depicted a crying demon, and there was an inscription above the picture. It was translated from Polian as lie. The next day, Sena found a huge pile of different things on her doorstep. She wanted to return everything, but the employee literally begged her not to do this, because otherwise he would be punished. In the end, she agreed to leave everything. The worker immediately handed her the remaining boxes and rushed home before the girl changed her mind. The girl stood there with these unnecessary boxes, not knowing what to do with them. To begin with, she decided to let them go to Earth. She kept thinking about Owen's owls. She was tormented by the question whether the Duke had really never been in love with Ellen. Remembering all the time they spent together, Sena realized that while he was next to her, he never once thought about Ellen. Aaron also never said that the Duke loved Ellen. Rather, he described her as an important person for the Duke. The role of the priestess was also perfect for Ellen. Moreover, considering that her blood is connected with demons, this is the best option for developing the plot. In Sena's head, the story looked like this. The antagonist goes in search of Ellen to break the seal. The main male characters stand up for her, and over time she falls in love. And Sena, as her neighbor, is destined to experience constant stress because of all these demonic creatures. Initially, Sena believed that the Duke was the main male character, but now she also admits the idea that he could be an antagonist. Her thoughts were interrupted by Dion suddenly appearing. When Sena asked if he went home, the guy slyly replied that he did. Seeing a huge pile of boxes, Dion thought that the heroine was shopping, but Sena said that these were all gifts. In fact, the girl was worried that she would have to deal with them alone, but she was lucky that Dion was nearby. The guy helped her, but still he was wondering who all this was from. Suddenly, Sena screamed. She looked at the box in shock. There was a whole bunch of mana crystals there. She couldn't even imagine how much it all cost. Dion suggested checking the rest of the boxes and bags too. Sena looked at the stones and thought that she should return everything back, since he could not accept such an expensive gift. However, given how many stones there are, she assumed that no one would even notice if she took a couple. After checking, Dion reported that some of the boxes contained mana tools that looked quite expensive. Having overcome her greed, she put the stones back and decided to return everything. However, it was impossible to leave everything outside, so she asked Dion to bring everything into the house. Seeing how easily Dion lifted the boxes, Sena was surprised. She thought the boxes were heavy. After all, Owen's servant could barely carry 2 boxes. To begin with, they decided to take everything to the second floor. But Dion was haunted by the question of who gave such a gift to Sena. Since talking about Owen would take too long, the heroine decided not to mention his name. She replied that it was one of her friends. Dion was not happy about this. From such an expression on his face, Sena turned pale. As a result, she was unable to sleep. All night, the heroine tried to remember at least something from her past life, but to no avail. The Duke prepared breakfast as usual and set the table. Seeing Sena's expression, he thought she didn't like it. Sena was preoccupied with thoughts about the sealing stone. At the same time, the Duke was looking forward to the evaluation of his food. Not hearing the usual praise, he offered to cook something else, but Sena said that there was no need, since everything was very tasty. Having learned that she liked the food, the Duke also started breakfast. But still, he was interested in what happened while he was gone, because it was obvious that Dion was not in a good mood. Sena didn't know how to explain this. After all, he has been like this since Sena said that the gifts were from an acquaintance. Dion got up from the table without even finishing, which was unusual for him. Sena and Carlman were surprised, because he usually eats more than everyone else. But Dion just sat silently on the couch, didn't say anything, and didn't ask anything. Seeing such unusual behavior of Dion, the Duke thought that he and Sena had quarreled. But the girl claimed that they did not quarrel, and moreover, she did not even know what he was angry about. Carlman offered his help. He said that he could ask him instead. He also wanted to tell them the latest news, but it was difficult to do so in such an atmosphere. Dion continued to watch them silently. The Duke also said that Aaron had to bring him something, and as soon as he arrived, he asked for an opportunity to explain everything. Sena was very happy, because the Duke would finally tell everything he knew about demons. However, seeing how Dion looked away every time, Sena decided to make the first move. She said that she would go get some cake, since Dion loves sweets. The Duke happily supported this idea. Seeing Carlman's bright smile, the heroine became more and more convinced that he could not be a hidden villain. Dion desperately wanted to join the conversation, but was still sulking. To compete with Dion, Sena bought the most delicious cake in the hope that he would like it. But suddenly someone called her. Turning around, she saw that it was Owen. Running to Sena, he said that they had a huge problem. Owen asked where the mana tools he gave were located. The girl replied that she was at home and said that she was just about to return them. But he said that they do not have time, since there is a rather strange object among the tools, and they need to hurry, otherwise the house may explode. The girl was speechless from shock. She was petrified with horror. After all, her house could fly into the air. She immediately rushed home. Sena was simply furious, so much so that she did not pay attention to Owen's screams. Finally reaching home, she was convinced that everything was normal. No traces of an explosion were found. However, even if everything was fine now, that didn't mean that thing wouldn't explode later. She immediately asked Owen to tell her what kind of thing it was, so she could return it. But the guy replied that it was dangerous, because if she wasn't careful, it would explode right in her hands. Turning pale with fear, Sena asked why he would even send something like that to her. But Owen could only apologize. Sena said that all the gifts were in the room on the second floor and asked them to quickly pick up what they needed. She only asked to sort this out as quickly as possible. But suddenly, she remembered that the Duke was in the house, and Owen suspects him. And the worst thing is that he is even ready to get rid of it. Therefore, their meeting could not be allowed. But she didn't have time to stop him. However, fortunately, the Duke was not there. She didn't understand where the Duke and Dion were now, so she didn't know how to proceed. Thinking that they had gone somewhere, Sena was happy. She let Owen home. I prepared tea for him. She said that all the things he sent were on the second floor. But he suddenly said that he suspected that there was a thief in the house. When she saw the gun, the girl was very scared and asked to put it away, since there was no one at home. But Owen insisted. He showed Sena shoe prints on the floor that clearly did not belong to her. Based on this, Owen was sure that there was someone in the house. Sena tried to convince him, but she couldn't tell the truth. Suddenly, the guy revealed his true intentions, saying that the most important thing now was not the possibility of an explosion. He asked permission to inspect her house. However, this was his goal from the very beginning. He came to catch the Duke. Sena tried to stop him, continuing to say that there was no thief in her house. However, catching the thief was only a pretext, so Owen turned a deaf ear to everything. Suddenly, footsteps were heard, and the girl turned pale. Realizing that the Duke was probably still in the house, Owen immediately went to the source of the sound. The girl was in a panic. She didn't know what to do or how to stop him. Owen was serious about catching the Duke. Having found the right room, he sharply opened the door and pointed the gun at the unknown person. But someone knocked the gun from his hands. The Duke grabbed the stranger, and Dion picked up the gun. He walked slowly towards Owen. He put the gun to his head and asked if it was worth shooting. But they were stopped by Sena. Thinking she was coming to help, Owen begged her to stop them. But the heroine was not going to help. She just said that if they were going to finish him off, then let them do it on the street. Dion and the Duke unanimously replied that they planned to do so. Owen didn't expect this turn of events. He was tied up for further questioning. The Duke, Sena, and Dion stood before him. Trying to hide his emotions, he greeted Duke Carlman, but he didn't even remember him. Owen claimed that they met 3 times, but Carlman still could not remember. Owen was ready to kill him with one look, while the Duke did not even notice it. Suddenly, he turned to Dion, asking who he was, because they had never crossed paths before. After hearing a lecture from Owen on how to properly hold a gun, Dion decided to show how much he could do. Realizing that Dion was not so simple, Owen began to beg for Sena to take him away. The heroine didn't even know what to do, because Owen provoked Dion more and more with every word. Looking at him, Sena remembered their last meeting. After all, then she really was happy. But now everything was different. She asked Owen to honestly answer the question of whether he had come to kill the Duke. Owen was outraged by such suspicions, but the heroine reminded him that he was the first to lie, saying that the gifts contained explosives. Hearing this, Dion realized that the one who sent those gifts was Owen. He hastened to clarify whether Owen had done this because of some personal feelings for Sena, and only when he heard a negative answer did he calm down. Owen honestly said that he only wanted to return the sealing stone that the previous Duke Carlman had stolen and find the saint. Owen was sure that Sena was a saint. With this statement, he stunned the heroine. And not only her, the Duke was also shocked. And Dion was no less surprised. After these words, they tried to imagine Sena as a saint. And when they imagined it, they couldn't hold back their laughter. They were all wondering how the guy came to this conclusion. Then, Owen said that he had heard rumors that she was famous for her healing abilities. But Sena denied all these rumors. Also, the rumors that she is immortal are lies. And on top of that, the heroine hates the temple. She's sick of people in white. And she's not close to just one priest. In addition, the heroine never healed anyone using holy power. The only thing she has is excellent health. Owen was shocked to learn that he was mistaken about the saint. Then, he asked the Duke about the sealing stone. But Carlman swore on the behalf of his family that such a thing had never happened. After which, he seriously wondered where he had even heard such nonsense. Owen asked to check the inside pocket of his jacket. There was a ring there. Dion and the Duke assumed it was a fake. Only Sena did not know what it was. The Duke explained that this was the Saint Emperor's ring. Dion took the ring from Carlman to confirm its authenticity. Having said this, he threw the ring away, but the ring suddenly disappeared. And then it appeared on Owen's finger. Thus, they were convinced that the ring was real. Owen also recalled that he had already said that he had received a request from the Holy Empire. However, Sena forgot everything, since she was half asleep at the time. Since Owen showed his ring, he asked the Duke to show his too. But Carlman replied that he did not have a ring. He said that it disappeared 30 years ago. Since the ring cannot be taken away by force, it was difficult to believe that it could disappear. The Duke was definitely hiding something. Owen didn't trust anyone. Dion watched everyone. Sena was shocked by this whole situation. In fact, there is more than one Saint Emperor ring. There are 5 more that are copies of the original, with the same shape and features. They also return to their owner if they move a certain distance away from him. The very first saint gave them to 5 different families, symbolizing a promise to watch over the sealed demons together and keep their existence a secret. But 30 years ago, the man with the Carlman family ring escaped with the stone in which the demon was imprisoned. And recently, hunters have witnessed a strange influx of mutated creatures, which is why the magicians from the search department of the association went on a long-term business trip. Hearing this, Sena realized that she was wrong in her suspicions. The detective department simply decided to look into the situation. While all this was happening, Duke Carlman arrived in the capital and began searching for the woman. And it looked very suspicious. Listening to Owen, Sena understood that although his judgment was not ideal, it was not unfounded. Sena kept thinking again and again about whether the Duke had another goal. At that moment, Aaron arrived, on time as always. Seeing the terrible picture in front of him, he decided not to intervene. He was speechless from fear. However, immediately realizing, he decided to leave. But Sena stopped him. She tried to explain everything to him. Interrupting their conversation, the Duke asked him to give him what he had brought. It was an ordinary diary, but the smell from it was so terrible that I didn't even want to touch it. It seemed that even if you just opened it, you'd be damned. The Duke explained that they had already checked everything, and there was nothing wrong with the notepad. At this time, Dion came up with something. He took the diary and headed towards Owen. The guy immediately felt alarmed and began screaming for Dion not to come near. But Dion, with the help of magic, partially untied his hands, and in exactly the same way I forced him to take the diary. Then he ordered it to be opened. But Owen was also afraid that he would be cursed. However, Dion insisted, recalling that the Duke had previously said that everything was fine. Sena also supported Dion's idea. Then the Duke offered to open it himself, but Owen refused, saying he didn't trust him. Although he was terrified, he managed to overcome his fear. As Carlman said, there was no curse. These were the recordings of one man. He was locked in the basement, where Marquis Euclise conducted experiments on him. At some point, the unknown person realized that he could control the dark smoke at his fingertips. Seeing this, the Marquise was delighted and exclaimed that he was producing mana, and they were almost there. The Marquise collected this smoke into a bottle. After this, the narrator's memories are interrupted. After some time, the Marquis dragged a blonde girl into his cell. She cried and said that she was scared. Seeing this, the narrator asked her to stop crying and asked her what her name was. The child answered Ellen. At that moment, the narrator instinctively realized that her blood was used for the experiments. This story was also part of Ellen's story. Having finished reading, they closed the diary. Dion was surprised. The Duke already knew about this, so he observed the reactions of others. Sena was horrified. She couldn't believe that someone had gone through such an experiment. The Duke said that 2 years ago, he accidentally ran into the person who entered this diary. Based on the records, the Marquis tried to use the blood of St. Helen to break the seal and revive the demon race. However, whether he succeeded or not is still unknown, since that man's magic was quite weak and unstable. Besides, he could not go far from the Marquis's estate, most likely because he still needed Ellen's blood. Returning the diary, Owen asked where this man was now. The Duke replied that he did not know because he had missed him. Carlman did not know where he was now, but the Duke found the place where he lived before. It was there that they found the diary. The Duke showed the diary to the Emperor, and he ordered that Ellen's safety be ensured first. That's why, when Carlman found her, he first suggested going to the Carlman estate, but Ellen refused. This was the perfect plan for her protection, so it was unfortunate for the Duke to be refused. He suggested that maybe it was because Ellen didn't like him. After hearing this story, Sena realized that it was her failure and felt guilty towards both Ellen and the Duke. When Ellen asked about the creatures that appear in the capital, the Duke replied that most likely they were sent by a demon in order to get Ellen's blood. But there were some problems with the barrier, so it did not function properly. At this point, all Imperial magicians have been sent to investigate the problem. After hearing the whole truth, Sena felt guilty for suspecting the Duke. After all, he was not a stalker at all. The Duke was only trying to protect Ellen. Sena blamed herself for ruining everything. Seeing her in this state, Xian became worried. The Duke blamed himself for everything. He believed that he had not made enough efforts. The more the Duke blamed himself, the more Sena blamed herself. She tried to atone for her guilt a little by saying words of consolation. The Duke sheepishly thanked him for the kind words. In order to calm her conscience, she continued to support the Duke. The Duke asked Sena what she was going to do after everything she had heard. The heroine replied that, as before, she would defend her home. The same went for Ellen's safety. Sena wanted to suggest telling Ellen everything, but she was interrupted by Owen. Only now did the Duke realize that he had also heard their entire conversation. They were both wary of each other. It was obvious that they would not be friends. Looking at Dion, Sena thought that he was most likely shocked to learn about Ellen's past. Suddenly, the heroine turned to Diona. She invited him with her. Dion followed her without hesitation. Arriving in the living room, Sena asked if Dion was worried about this whole situation. Having received a positive answer, the heroine said that she understood how he felt. Hearing this, Dion excitedly asked when she found out. Sena replied that not long ago. Dion was embarrassed that his feelings had been revealed. Sena, trying to support him, said that she knew how long he had liked her. Hearing the last phrase, Dion realized that they were talking about different girls. He hastened to stop her and asked who she was talking about now. Sena answered that it was about Ellen, because of her refusal, he even cried in front of her house. She also said that she knew all along that Dion had not given up on Ellen. However, since Ellen is a saint, she will always be in danger. Doan no longer said anything, but only listened to Sena. But the heroine suddenly suggested that Dion should no longer come to her home. Dion was dumbfounded. Sena believed that she was doing this for the safety of Dion. She also added that there is no need to worry about Ellen, since the Duke will protect her. Having heard all the girls' arguments, Dion realized that Sena believed that he was in danger. However, he did not understand why she thought so. Sena explained that due to his lack of combat experience, he could get hurt during battles with demons. Then Dion reminded that he was a magician, but Sena remembered everything, including the fact that he almost died due to loss of mana control. It was then that the girl realized the seriousness of the situation. She tried her best to convince him, but he believed that he could also be useful. That's why I asked him not to prohibit me from coming there anymore. Sena was weak in the face of such an expression. She couldn't say no to that cute face. Therefore, during the refusal, she turned away so as not to give in. She couldn't put him in danger. To convince him to back down, she told him how terrible demons can be. But Dion simply remained silent. Suddenly, he asked if she really wanted to make him out to be a scoundrel who ignored danger. He couldn't believe that Sena wanted him to leave everyone and run away. Sena had nothing to answer to this. He once again covered himself with Ellen, saying that he wanted to protect her himself and asked permission to come to this house. After so many arguments, Sena had exhausted all reasonable reasons for refusal. She agreed, but on one condition. Dion agreed without hesitation to fulfill any of her requests. He was ready for anything. After some time, the Duke joined them. When he asked what they were doing, Dion furiously replied that he should take a closer look. Dion, sitting surrounded by books, read a book about demons. The Duke was about to leave when Sena noticed him and called him to join. She had a huge stack of books in her hands. Seeing so many books, he asked what they were for. Dion, having received another pile of books to read, turned pale with horror. Sena explained to the Duke that these were all books about demons and demonic creatures. They are needed to prepare for the next battles. The heroine explained that in order to win, they need to learn more about their enemies. She did not even allow Dion to take a break from books. She also told the Duke that Ellen and Dion have known each other since childhood, but due to memory loss, Ellen does not remember this. It is for this reason that Dion also wants to deal with the creatures along with them. While they were talking, Dion did not know where to get away from these books. Sena also prepared a stack of books for the Duke. She asked questions to determine his level of training and to find out about his combat experience. Having finished with the part about demons, Sena moved on to another very important issue. She offered to tell Ellen everything, but the Duke believed that this was impossible. Suddenly, Ellen knocked on the door. Recognizing the neighbor's voice, Sena went to open it. The Duke offered to talk to her right away. Although the Duke considered it impossible, he still thought that there was no harm in trying. For starters, he thought that he and Dion should leave. Sena waited until the guys went up to the second floor. Only after that did she open the door. A sweet neighbor was standing on the threshold. She brought cookies for Sena. She also said that she had some gift for the heroine. Sena invited her into the house and treated her to tea. While she was waiting for Sena, she noticed a dragon figurine and thought it was some kind of magical object. But the heroine said that it was an ordinary lamp, and she only bought it because it looked cool. Although in fact, she only bought it because Dion liked it. Ellen was surprised to learn that it was an ordinary lamp. Sena felt awkward because she didn't know how to start a conversation. That's why I decided to start with cookies. But the basket contained more than just livers. Ellen sheepishly explained that it was a homemade ointment. She prepared it, noticing the wound on Sena's hand. Ellen apologized for bringing the ointment so late. Sena never talked about her injury, so she didn't expect Ellen to notice. However, she was touched by Ellen's concern. The neighbor clarified that she was not a doctor, but asked to accept the gift. Sena was incredibly happy with the gift. Ellen was also happy that her work was appreciated. Sena was touched by the kindness of the main character, but she forced herself to pull herself together. As a serious conversation was ahead, Sena decided to start by asking where she was before she opened a flower shop. Ellen replied that she was not entirely sure, since all her memories were blurry. She said that people from the temple found her unconscious in the forest. They gave her shelter and work, and Ellen spent all her earned money on opening a flower shop. For some reason, her name is the only thing Ellen remembers clearly. She also didn't remember her parents, but she didn't want to look for them either. Ellen showed an old scar on her forehead and said that she had a feeling that her past life was not good. Sana was furious at the way Ellen was treated by her family. Noticing Sana's anger, Ellen gently took her hand. She tried to calm her down, saying that there was no need to worry, because since she moved here, only good people surrounded her. And most of all, she was glad that she met Sana. She was grateful to Sana for always protecting her. Looking at the happy lady in front of her, Sana doubted her intentions, because the past would only cause Ellen pain. Because Sana was lost in thought, she held Ellen's hand for too long. But still, since Ellen's safety was at issue, she felt it would be right to tell her everything. Then she asked Ellen if she knew the Marchioness of Euclid. But for some reason, the neighbor did not hear the question. Then she asked again, much louder this time, but the result was the same. Not understanding what was happening, Sana shouted out her question. Ellen was silent for a while, but suddenly, she said that she couldn't hear what Sana was saying at all. After Ellen left, Sana was in prostration. She did not understand why it was necessary to make sure that Ellen could not even hear the name of the Marquise. Dion replied that most likely it was entirely Ellen's choice, since the magician probably did everything exactly as she asked. Sana was slightly surprised by the cold tone in which he spoke about her. Suddenly, Dion remembered that he had previously mentioned the name of the Marquis in a conversation with Ellen, and suggested that she did not want to hear this name at all, due to the fact that there were too many painful memories associated with it. Sana couldn't even imagine what the child had to do, so that he wouldn't even listen to his name. All this time, they were overheard by Owen, who also learned that Ellen did not hear the name of the Marquise. A few hours ago, Owen stood at Sana's door, thinking that there was something suspicious about the Duke. He could easily forge the diary, and he avoided questions about the ring. The first thing he decided to do was talk to Sana again, but Ellen stood at the threshold. Seeing her, Owen immediately hid. While watching her, he saw the girl enter Sana's house. And later, the loud voice of the heroine was heard, who, for reasons unknown to Owen, continued to shout the name of the Marquis. Then he got closer to figure out what was happening. And hearing the girl's conversation, she realized that Ellen did not hear the name Euclid at all. Now back to the present, where Sana, Dion, and the Duke are discussing their future plans. Sana voiced her decision, saying that she would protect her home, and at the same time help protect Ellen. However, she immediately indicated that she would only fight with creatures, and did not want to get involved with the Marquis and demons. The Duke accepted her terms and happily thanked her for her help. Owen was shocked by this expression on Carlman's face. This man is a cold-blooded monster, who killed all the members of his family who stood in his way. And now he thanked the commoner with such a stupid smile. To say that Owen was shocked by this would be an understatement. Suddenly, Sana felt something, but Owen managed to hide. Having finished the discussion, Sana invited everyone to return to their work. The hunter was relieved to realize that he had not been noticed. But after finishing talking about the creatures, they began to discuss everyday things. Dion asked the Duke to prepare dinner. Sana was incredibly happy and asked what exactly the Duke was going to cook. And Carlman proudly said that he was working on one dish. Owen looked at them with his mouth open and eyes wide, because he thought that they would discuss a new plan or talk about Ellen. He couldn't believe they were going to leave it like that. But in any case, he did not trust the Duke, and was thinking about how to get close to him unnoticed. Then, he remembered Sana's close relationship with the Duke, and found a solution. The next day, Sana's face contorted in surprise. Owen stood at her doorstep again, and said that he had come to accept his punishment. The girl did not understand what he was talking about, and why he looked so joyful, asking for punishment. Seeing that the girl was silent, he himself offered to beat himself as much as she wanted. Thinking that he was a pervert, Sana asked him to leave immediately. But Owen insisted he wanted to sincerely apologize for his wrongdoings. He gave a long speech about how sorry he was. He said that he usually acts more rationally, but this time his legs ran ahead of his head, because he thought that the Duke was threatening her. Having finished his speech, Owen was pleased with himself, because he believed that it was just a perfect apology. However, the heroine had a different opinion. As soon as Owen finished his speech, she said goodbye and slammed the door. Owen was simply shocked. He expected a different reaction. Sana walked irritably to her room, not understanding why she had to listen to all this nonsense early in the morning. When Dion asked who it was, Sana replied that he was an extremely persistent delivery man. Owen continued to scream and call for Sina. Hearing his voice, Dion immediately knew who it was.